Good morning.
Wait for it.
Cool deal. Thanks. Yep. All right. Sounds good.
So we're still, I look like we're relatively gathered up here in person, and we've got, quite a few folks, it looks like, on the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this meeting to order and begin. So we'll start with roll call and we'll review the agenda. I'm actually chairing today just for awareness for Director Gibbs, who is in Washington, D.C. at the Federal Wildfire Commission meeting, and Angela is here to serve in his stead. So with that, we'll do roll and then we'll get moving. Director Gibbs or his designee. Here you go. Director Morgan or designee.
Hey, Vaughn Jones is on for Mike.
Thank you, Vaughn. Regional Forester Bem or designee. All right, we've got Steve Lohr in the house. John Ring. Frank Falzone.
Here.
Samantha Albert.
Here.
Councilmember Selwyn Weitzman is excused. Commissioner Abe Layden.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Commissioner. Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Present.
Oh, wonderful to see you this morning.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
Commissioner Veronica Medina.
Here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Commissioner Clyde Church. Ethan Buchholz. So there's Ethan. Brett Polk.
Here.
And Katie McGrath Novak is excused. Christina Burry.
Morning.
Good morning, Christina. Amy Moyer is excused. Mark Morgan.
Present.
Paige Lewis. Carol Walker.
Present.
Hi, Carol. Julie Stencil.
Good morning.
Christy Belton.
I'm here.
All right. Pat Dorsey. Let's see, Pat. Scott Jones. Let's see, Scott. Senator Cutter is excused. Representative Lynch, are you on the line?
I'm here, present.
Excellent. Good day, sir. With those absences, do we have the map?
Yes, we do have quorum.
We have quorum, wonderful. All righty, so our first order of business, now that we have quorum, do we have any edits to the July 27th meeting summary by any of the members? Hearing none, could I get a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Commissioner Shattuck McNally. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Ms. Belton. All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. All righty, moving on.
Can we just check who the 719 number is?
Sure. Who is the 719-850-2355 number on the line?
You have to, I'm trying to remember, *6.
Sure.
All right, well, TBD.
Okay, yeah, we'll check back in. If you, whoever with the 719 number, if you,
Oh,
and
there's Paige.
Paige is joining as well, great. If you want to identify yourself in the future, that'd be great. Our next agenda item is our conflict of interest language and legal guidance on types of leave and the impact on quorum. So this, in your meeting materials that were shared in advance of the meeting, there's some draft guidance on the conflict of interest from our Attorney General Office Representative Elizabeth Joyce, I think, is on with us. Excellent. Elizabeth is here to answer any questions we have on this guidance. Did everybody have a chance to review? Do we have any feedback or any concerns?
Hey, Matt, real quick, this is Dan Dallas.
Oh, good. Dan is on the 709. Thanks, Dan. Did anybody have any feedback on the conflict of interest language? Okay, here then, can I have a motion to approve the guidance on conflict of interest?
I'll move.
Thank you. All right, Samantha and Commissioner Shattuck McNally. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Courtney, can you enable screen sharing? Yes.
Hearing none. Moving on. You guys were just doing really well today. Just want to say I'm proud of everybody. So next, Elizabeth, we had some questions. I'm just reading from a script here at this point about under what circumstances appointed members of the council can be represented by a proxy. For example, if people are on parental leave. Could you walk us through the proposed edits to our bylaws on this specific topic? And it looks like Angela's going to be sharing those.
Sure. Yeah, and I can speak just a little bit generally too before we jump into these proposed additions to the bylaws. But you know, so I'm understanding the question is that there are a lot of members on this council, and we all have you know, life events that come up. Sometimes it can be difficult to make every meeting in light of some of those circumstances that come up in life. And you know, how can we balance keeping regular attendance with the, you know, the appointed members to the council, you know, within those constraints of other life issues. So generally speaking, you know, there's nothing that strictly prevents a council like this one from having proxy voting. You know, the reasons that it's not advised to be too liberal with that is that, you know, there are, everyone on this council is filling a certain role, and, you know, some of you are specifically appointed by the governor because of your experience and your knowledge and the particular insight that you bring to the council, and you're also generally filling a particular outline category in statute. And so we want to stay, you know, consistent with that direction as far as who is actually making substantive decisions for the council. And also, you know, just for consistency and experience of the council, to have all of your members participating regularly is important to continue that shared knowledge and drawing on everything that you've learned. And so with that in mind, I think also the bylaws have, in another section, has incorporated a statement, you know, encouraging regular attendance and how important that is. I think that's section 1, subsection 3. Don't necessarily need to jump to that on the screen here, but if you're looking for that, that's in there as well. So that's really our starting position, is that we want to encourage regular attendance and have all the members participating to the full extent when they can. But again, life events come up and it can make it difficult in some circumstances. And when that happens, you know, because you have to have a quorum to meet and make decisions, you know, if you have too many members missing, then it's difficult to meet quorum in sometimes. And this council does not have that many meetings annually. And so that could make it difficult to continue getting business done. So to address that, that's why we worked on some kind of targeted language to create circumstances where it may be that the council would allow proxy voting. And so maybe I will just sort of summarize what you're looking at on the screen. First of all, the first highlighted section under B there, this section is really targeted to the individually appointed members, not the ex officio members, because statute does allow, and it's incorporated in your bylaws, that those members may have a designee already. And so those members have a built-in flexibility when they're not able to make a specific meeting. So that's why this is pointing to only that subset of members. And then the rest of it is trying to outline those kind of narrow conditions when a proxy would be allowed and the steps to follow. So built in here is that we suggest that the council adopt a process to sort of formalize this proxy process for these members, which would require that the designation be made in writing. And that also importantly, so that's at number 2, and then at number 3, that whoever is designated as the proxy does receive specific instructions from the council members so that they, are prepared going into a meeting, that they're able to participate as a member on the council, and knows how the representative member wants them to act and cast their vote. And then, so that would be the process and the requirements, and then sort of the effort to make this a pretty targeted occurrence would be the points that are incorporated in kind of really number 1 and number 5, that the member has identified, prospectively, that there will be, that this is not just kind of a one-off, a meeting conflict came up on your calendar and you decide that you can't make this meeting. And so, you're going to be absent from one meeting. This is really more designed for those circumstances where you're planning for a intentional leave, or something has come up and you're, getting things in order as you're planning ahead. And so you've identified that there is going to be a need for this at 1 or at 2 or more meetings. And then it's also limited to using it at 3 council meetings per year. And so actually, as I'm speaking, we just in our second review of this, we added the council meetings per year, but actually I may want to have the council discuss that a little bit, because now I'm not sure how often you have those council meetings. And so I would be curious, Angela and Courtney, after we have made a few other changes to this provision, if you would still recommend that that's the right trigger to put on that. So let's put a pin on that number. But the point is that this is intended to be, a limited term and not a frequent occurrence for any one member, but to give a little bit of flexibility on that.
Please.
So, and then finally, because the issue of having absent members, what that results in is that sometimes you might not make quorum. We've called out that if a member has followed this process and designated their proxy, and that proxy attends, then that would satisfy that member's attendance for quorum and not prohibit your ability to take action.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And just for context for the council, you'll recall that we had this conversation initially this past summer when we were discussing, for folks who are on leave, whether it's parental leave, medical leave, etc., could they designate a proxy who could vote? AAG Joyce pointed out that if we restrict, if we sort of base it on types of leave, it potentially introduces some privacy issues for members. And so this draft language gets around those potential privacy concerns by just creating a process where someone can designate a proxy, regardless of the reason that they may be missing several meetings in a given year. So I think, obviously, let's have a discussion about this language, whether people think it makes sense, is going to work, is appropriate. And then I think there's also a conversation to have around, as AAG Joyce said, around, what's sort of the minimum number of meetings this should be used for, but then also the maximum. And I think the maximum, my thinking around that is, for instance, if somebody knew that they were going to be absent for a whole year, let's say, I would think at that point they may say, I can no longer serve on this council, my seat should be reappointed. And so that's where I'm coming from, but open to conversation. Thanks.
Elizabeth, did you have any other comments in sort of the framing before we open it up to others?
Nope, I think I covered I think what I wanted to cover as an introduction, and I'm happy to hear what other people either think about the specific language or if you have more general questions before we dive into that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that framing. Members of the council, any comments, feedback? Is this something that would be workable from your perspective?
3 seems excessive to me. Because that's essentially, instead of a 12-month leave, it's kind of a 9-month leave. So it does seem excessive to me. I would be more in favor of 1 or 2.
Other comments?
Just clarify, there's kind of 2 ways that you can get appointed to the council. There's one, like Director McCombs, that represents an agency, and there's always a seat for someone at that agency. So if you're on leave for multiple meetings, you designate someone from your agency and they fill that role, right?
Correct, yeah. So there's specific standing positions that have the ability to designate.
So we're really only talking about the part of the council, like myself, that is appointed to fill a specific area of expertise or something like that, right?
Correct.
I'm easily replaceable. You, sir, on the other hand, very much, very
I don't know
the challenge to do so.
With the county commissioners and sort of those seats, is that similar? Like if the county commissioner is out, they could sort of appoint another county commissioner, or is it someone from their county, or?
So they are in your category.
They're in
Here, Article 4, Section 182, which is consistent with the statute. The county commissioners fall under that governor-appointed list, where this language would apply.
One of my staff's listening in today, so it can kind of help me take notes. So that was one thing, if we ever did this and he's listening in, if I had to, you know, have an executive session or we had a national disaster or something, I mean, I would probably, the person that's on Josh Roberts would probably be someone who would fill in if this was passed and ever had to, but it's probably would be very right. And I think about someone maybe, let's say they're going through cancer treatment or something and or in the hospital, or because I have a friend who's had to move to the Mayo Clinic for a few months, may not be back by December. So I just think about these different scenarios. I'm not sure it's just got flexibility, but
Yeah.
you know, but still we need them to be here and have that expertise. So
Sure.
it's,
I'm sort of with Christy that I think fewer meetings, if there's one meeting where there's an important vote and like I can't be there, but I want a proxy to vote at that one meeting. I think that council members should be able to do that, to have your voice heard. But then I don't know what the limit is of how many times you can just not show up and show someone else to vote on something. I think there should be a limit on that at some point.
So to that point, I mean, 3 versus 1, 2?
Maybe like 3 in the course of a year or something. You know, it doesn't even have to be consecutive, but.
Okay.
How many times do we meet? 4 times?
So we have 4 full council meetings per year currently. That could always change, but and then obviously umpteenth committee meetings.
Yeah, and so the language is full council, so that would be these meetings if we stated the language. I mean, what if we did half, like so that it leaves room for change?
50%.
Yeah, 50%.
So 2 instead of 3, if assuming we continue to meet quarterly.
But if there's more, that way it's flexible. Because I agree, I feel like a 6-month, you could anticipate that, and if it's beyond that, I think that's that conversation that you mentioned, maybe asking someone else to step in.
I like to also, because you can designate people to do votes and stuff, but you can also just not be at a meeting and have someone else come to take notes and listen. Right? You don't have to designate a proxy for every meeting that you're missing.
Commissioner Layden?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I want to acknowledge and express gratitude to those that drafted this. I would just say, you know, we meet so rarely that I think it's really important we prioritize our work on the substance of why we're here, which is forest health. And while I appreciate, the back and forth discussion about process and proxies, I think if we can keep that abbreviated and maintain the focus of our work on what we're actually here to do, that would be probably the most productive for all of us.
Thanks, Commissioner. Other thoughts from the council? Here at the table, I get a general sense that 2 is better than 3. Do I have anybody on the screen here that would suggest that is not a consensus? Acknowledging I struggling to read your body language across the World Wide Web. All right. I think being a little bit more conservative on item 5 and changing that from 2 instead of 3 seems like a general consensus. Is there any other feedback on this process as a whole?
So I would then point folks to, and I don't know if my screen's still sharing. Let's see here. I'll reshare it. So item 1 currently reads, a member foresees they will be unable to attend 2 or more consecutive meetings due to extenuating circumstances. I'm hearing perhaps a preference for, these 2 meetings do not have to be consecutive. So maybe it's just revised to a member foresees they will be unable to attend a meeting due to extenuating circumstances. And then folks could assign a proxy for an individual meeting, quarter 2, and then maybe they need to do it again quarter 4 or Q2 and Q3, whatever. Is that whatever I'm hearing from everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Online, does that make sense? Yep, I'm seeing some head nods. Okay.
Commissioner Layton, is that a hanging hand, raised hand, or did you have another comment, sir?
It's a lingering hand. I was going to call the question, but it sounds like we're wrapping up here.
All right.
I've got one more question to ask the group on playing out these numbers. So this would allow any member to designate a proxy for, half of your meetings in any one year. Is there any interest or concern about having that, having somebody be able to do that, every year of their term? Would you be interested in, an overall cap on the number of proxies, or, a restriction that it can't be used in every year or something like that? I mean, it's there you're playing with it's hard to foresee, if health circumstances or whatnot come up. You don't know what's coming forward, but at the same time, you don't want half of your members gone for half of your meetings every year.
Appreciate the point. Other thoughts on this additional context? I get a general sense that this group is committed to these issues and committed to these discussions, and I'm just wondering if perhaps we evaluate how these bylaws are in service to us over the next year or so, and if we need to make adjustments based on lack of participation of one or more individuals, that we could adjust them at that time. Would that be suitable?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Elizabeth, did you have any other comments before I ask for a motion?
Not for me, no, thank you.
All right. Hearing no additional feedback and with the changes that were made, do I have a motion to approve these bylaws in their current form?
So moved.
Commissioner Raymond. Thank you, Commissioner Shadwick-Nally. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Go ahead.
And before we leave AAG Joyce, there's one other topic I wanted to bring up.
Oh, please. Go ahead.
Apologies. So there were also some questions in previous meetings about terms. This coming year is actually year 3 for everybody, but most importantly for governor appointed positions. So if you fall into the conversation we were just having, if you're not an agency staff member, your term is up next October-ish. In our conversations with AAG Joyce, the statute is silent on whether folks can be reappointed. And so our determination is that it will be at the discretion of the governor's office, whether folks are reappointed or whether their seat is someone else is reappointed to their seat end of next year. So I just want to put that out there because I think it's important for some of the conversations we're going to have today about things that folks want to focus on here in the next year. Obviously, if you were recently appointed, this does not apply to you. But for folks who were initially appointed back in 2021, that's the clock. AAG Joyce, anything else to say on that?
No, I would just echo that it is at the discretion of the governor, and we are looking into whether there are any other considerations to that will be taken into account as far as whether reappointments are made or not, or any other restrictions or limitations, rather not concerning any specific member. So we're continuing to look into that to see whether we can provide any other insight on that question, but ultimately it is the governor's decision, and I think you'll be hearing more about that process coming into next year.
Any questions? All right.
Thanks, Angela. All right, so our next agenda item is committee updates, and we'll get some discussion here from Brett and Commissioner Shattuck McNally. So we'll start with Leveraging Resources Committee. And looks like the bullets I had, Brett, were around the forest tracker and the pre-fire playbook.
Yeah, I don't know, Christina, that if there's anything else you wanted to say as chair of the committee and what you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, Brett, just in terms of the agenda, I think you were listed first for the Colorado Forest Tracker. So, so that would be great if you could give that update on the Forest Tracker. And then when you're done and people have their questions answered about the Forest Tracker, then I can move on to general updates from the subcommittee and talk about the Forest Resilience Guide.
Great. Well, I will reintroduce the Forest Tracker to the council. There was an email that I think got sent out to the entire council from Courtney. So you can dig that up, or I don't know if Angela or someone wants to put the link. You can just Google Colorado Forest Tracker and it should come up a website with more information on the State Forest Service webpage. Really excited about this project. It's something CFRI, we started collecting data on forest management activities across the state in 2016 and have done it as a static product twice now. Did it recently and just published the data in 2022. And now we're collaborating closely with the Colorado State Forest Service to make it bigger and better across the whole state still, but then the data will be posted on the Colorado Forest Atlas on the State Forest Service, where they house all of, not all, I never say all, but the majority of the data that is kind of the go-to source for Colorado forest data. The goal of the tracker, as it says on the website, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm paraphrasing, but is to collect and compile forest management activities. And we had a webinar a week or two ago. And there were lots of questions about, is defensible space and home hardening part of this? Is you know, grazing and rangeland habitat and all these, is mowing part of this? And we're really trying to start narrow and say, where are we actively managing our forests? And this means cutting, removing, rearranging woody vegetation, so forests as well as shrubs. And also, where are we planting trees? So where is reforestation and planting trees happening as well? So where are trees being removed and grown? Other things such as insect and disease outbreaks, wildfires, those are already tracked. That data is already on the Colorado Forest Atlas, right? So this is a targeted, where are we actually doing intentional management of our forests, is the goal of this database, to make that a transparent resource for the state of Colorado. So that's that's sort of the overview and kind of what's in and out of it. There's a lot of fine lines that we're going to have to figure out as we look through the data. There is, grazing on Gamble Oak and shrubs that is targeted on woody vegetation. Can we separate that out from lots of other kinds of grazing activities? I don't know yet, right? So our sense is send the data and we'll sort through it and figure it out. More data is better at this point. So that's sort of a brief overview. Our goal is, and then we'll post the data. The data will be accessible for anyone to download and use. We also have a dashboard that has some basic summary statistics and metrics up there of what kinds of activities are happening across the state by different jurisdictions of counties or land ownerships, things like that. But that's sort of the basic part. So maybe I'll stop there. Just questions about what is the forest tracker and what's in it, what isn't, what questions about that. And then I want to go into rules for the Forest Health Council to use this resource to help us make decisions and have leverage the expertise of all of the people on the council as advisory to the Forest Health Tracker of what kind of data we want, how we want to display it, what metrics are important to people making decisions at a statewide level. So the data is meant to be useful for community groups and people, partners on the ground making decisions and that level, but also it's a great compilation for statewide decision makers as well, which represents this council. So questions about what the forest tracker is, and then we'll talk about how we want to use it.
I just have a quick question. So I just got online and to check it out. So do you need to request an account in order to be able to use or receive all the data? Because it's saying request an account or sign in. It's really not able. I don't get anything.
You want to take this?
Yeah, so with the Forest Atlas, everyone does have to request an account in order to have access to the full suite of tools that are housed in that architecture.
Okay.
And it's really not a onerous process. It's just a mechanism by which the data stewards on the back end can be aware of sort of who's accessing and using the system.
Okay.
So Brett, how old of treatments do you include in there?
Great. So we are aiming to start from January 1st, 2020 through, and we actually had a cutoff of September, I forget if it was December 31st or October 1st of this year, 2023. The federal fiscal year.
You don't want.
So before 2020, not really. If there is data before then, I think you're welcome to share it, but we recognize that there's just a fading record of digital data before then. And even back to 2000 is going to be challenging, right, to get a complete picture of what has happened. So that's what we found in previous efforts, that there is a good amount of data back to there. Yeah, 2020 to the present.
Okay. And then are you including prescribed burns in that?
Absolutely. Yep. So prescribed fire, intentional prescribed fire, as well as is a forest vegetation management activity, right? So it's anything that we do to intentionally manage woody vegetation.
Good question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm committed to finding a way to get NRCS projects engaged in this. It'll be just a little bit tricky, but it's possible. But my question is, do you have an estimate for like the ratio of data that you're going to be able to collect compared with like true in reality all of the forest management that's happening on the ground?
It's a good question. Maybe just a quick check. Those of you online, you can hear the questions and all of our conversation well, or should I repeat things? Okay. Yeah, I don't really, we're never going to know exactly where everything is. My impression is the majority of the acres that are managed, I think we'll get a high percentage of that. But that doesn't mean that it's all the most important things to know about exactly what's happening. And some of the ones we're missing might be really important to know for certain kinds of decisions. So I think we'll, I don't know, hopefully 70, 80, yeah. I'm not gonna put a percentage on it, but majority of the acres, but
see, yeah, there's a couple of things. I'm just curious.
I mean, it is predicated on people sending it to us, right? So the
Yes.
calls will go out. I don't know how regularly, like we'll actually send data calls out, but
so we've talked about updating it once a year with data calls. And that is a difference between Colorado and some other states, where other states, many forest agencies or private timber companies or things like that are required to submit data to a state agency, and Colorado doesn't have that. So the federal agencies all have different databases, and their data, because they're a federal agency, is publicly available. So we have access to all of that and have been communicating with U.S. Forest Service, the BLM, you know, different federal agencies, Park Service, things like that. NRCS is a federal agency, right? And then the State Forest Service is co-leading this project with us, so all the state data is included. But outside of that, it is based on voluntary submissions. And so that's where we sent out an email and another plea to encourage your partners to submit data in order for this to be useful. And this is meeting a need of a demand we've heard. So if you want it to be useful, then encourage your people to send it.
So I was curious, you had, and thanks for the work that you're doing on this. And I was curious about the meeting you had to kind of introduce it and take a lot of questions. What kind of groups or folks came and what kind of questions did you have?
The webinar was organized through the Colorado Forest Collaborators Network and Katie McGrath Novak, who sits on this council. So it was a lot of people within that network that were there, and that was somewhat intentional to sort of reach the people on the ground that are using and have an interest in the data and also have their hands on the data on their computer. So yeah, that was a lot of who came, but there was also people from American Forests that were on the call. And there were other people interested, again, more in the reforestation data and that sort of thing. And some fire protection districts is a key component that is not always really integrated and included. They do a lot of forest management work in different ways. And I don't think it always makes it on all of the maps. And it, you know, it's sort of disjointed in different places.
So this covers also private property.
If people submit.
it's, yeah, the
Right,
intentionality is that like we have this clear, constantly improving picture of where we've done work that will drive where we do additional work, but it'll also drive sort of how we effectively monitor the effectiveness of the places that we've already done work.
So I'm thinking of a large ranch in my area that's gonna do private forest mitigation. How would they submit data to you?
So data submissions, there's a button on the website
Okay,
and you hit submit data and then it asks you a couple questions and there's forms. So the data submission is through the website. There's a couple different options where you can submit if you are handy with GIS and you have it all, you know, lots of files. There's ways to then just submit batch hundreds of files. If you have just 10 files or a low number of projects, there's a different way to do that. We actually have where you can go on and draw your, you know, a map comes up on the website and draw your individual polygon and type in the information right there. If you just have a handful and you don't have GIS capabilities or things aren't tracked. So I think our message is we're also, and State Forest Service has been great with their GIS staff. If you have questions, reach out and we will hop on a call one-on-one to try and make sure your data is included. There's State Forest Service has done a great job. They have a big GIS team now, and we're contributing our GIS staff to this as well. So there's people to help with tech support. Mark Morgan, you have your hand up?
Just a quick comment. In the past, with a lot of private landowners that we work for, they tend to fall into two groups. One group is that they are very private and they don't want to share any information, and your silence is part of your program of working for them. The other one is people who are attempting to gain funding or support from agencies. So obviously they're going to share it, but what also happens in the industry is many of these types of surveys, our industry is small enough and spread out enough in this state that you can look through surveys like that and directly assess what your competitors are doing within the state and what they're getting done. You can look at it and say, this is what happened here, and this is the volume that they're moving, or this is the volume of this product that they're moving. And sometimes it can be a real competitive disadvantage. So there's a federal study that is funded every year through the Forest Service that I know from other operators, there's a lot of resistance to participating in it too much because they can absolutely identify what volume of what products you're moving in your work area. And it's, I try to be on the other side of that coin, but it's something you need to consider in gathering this data. And it's a very real thing.
Yeah, I appreciate that point, and it's something we've thought of. I think the benefits and the demand from the Forest Health Council, as well as sort of the Forest Collaboratives Network and lots of people, is in order for us to collectively manage our forests, they don't know property boundaries. And so the more information we have, it's about helping inform those decisions. I think we've had experience that you've talked about because we've tried to do economic studies on the collaborative forest landscape restoration programs on the Front Range and the Uncompahgre. That includes economic studies of economic benefits of those programs, and getting contractors to participate has been up and down because of the reasons that you articulated. So
Brett, isn't it up to the individual landowner to share or not share that information?
Yeah, right. And so I think I'm hoping, and there's lots of reason to think about how this could be a real benefit too, for private industry to say, oh, there's a lot of activity happening over here. Maybe I'll, think of other ways to develop outlets, or there's not a lot of activity happening over here. Maybe that's a new opportunity that I could, enter into. So I'm hoping that it goes both ways, but I definitely acknowledge and hear your concern about private industry and competition and some of those things. I guess my thought is it's not too much of a secret right now where things are happening and who's doing what. So I don't know how much more we're revealing than the industry people already really know.
I think one thing you just hit on it right there. Everybody thinks they have secrets in industry, and almost nobody does. It's not real important to them. The perception that they do is real important to them.
But having it seen as a benefit to industry, I think, the more the council can help us message that would be, I'd appreciate that.
I think one last quick comment. Quite a few years ago, Dr. Dennis Lynch did a study there out of CSU on forest products, and pretty exhaustive study. I think it was around 2000, and Dr. Mackus was fairly new in it. He participated in it, and there was all kinds of information that I, as an operator, looked at and said, and I literally called it my treasure map. X marks the spots. You could go down through there in the research that he'd done and choose these products. The demand for them was much larger than I thought they were, and the demand by area was much larger, and it was like X marks the spot of the treasure map. And as a positive point for you, that was very successful. And the other thing was amazing, the number of people who, even when you told them about it, didn't use it, didn't look at it, and made a point of ignoring it. So it's a two-edged sword, but that kind of research, if you're trying to promote it, you can tell them this is X marks the spot where the treasure is buried, and see if they're smart enough to use it.
Forest Tracker, AKA Treasure Map. Thanks, Mark. Any other questions, comments on the tracker before we keep moving with a discussion on resilience?
But did you want to ask how the council wants to participate?
Yeah, I think it's good. And we can continue. We don't have to decide today. I think it's good to just get general awareness out. So if you want to move on, I'm okay with that. But I think on the website, there's a link to a concept paper that sort of outlines the concept of why we're doing it, has all the details about exactly what kinds of data we want. And you'll see at the very end in there, there's a note about a steering committee. And we specifically call out the Colorado Forest Health Council as a steering committee to help advise development and application of this forest health tracker, in part because it has been discussed in the Leveraging Resources Committee over at least the past year. So there's been other reasons and motivations to develop it, but I think it's been kind of co-developed through the committee on this Forest Health Council. So there's a role for sort of data collection and data management that we have lots of contacts here. And I've already leveraged that a little bit with the Forest Service, with John Ring and the BLM, and sort of how do we know exactly what your data means, Frank as well. And then there's another role I think that I'd like to develop, and we'd like to develop, of application and communication of this forest tracker for data and dashboards, and just develop a role, what that role is, how much time it's going to take, what, you know, who has the final say. I think that's all still up in the air, but we're really eager to leverage the Forest Health Council for helping continue to co-develop this.
It looks like you have a very specific timeline on that last page of.
We're hoping to get the data out and available this spring. So we did put spring instead of a specific month to see how long it takes, but spring, I feel like we'll get there.
Well, right now, October to November, data solicitation and collection.
Yeah.
And the partner follow-up and data cleaning. So.
Yeah. So I think it's October 10th. We set out a month ago is when we first started advertising and asking for data, making an open call. The more you can encourage people to do that in the next couple of weeks, that would be fantastic. I think in there it says data follow-up with partners. So if the word is still trickling out and it takes longer, we're going to keep trying to get data for a little bit after that. We will have to eventually decide, like, okay, this is what we're going with this year, and then put it out there. And if there's momentum, then next year more people will contribute data, is our hope, and it'll build. So I think it's something that's going to have to build over the years.
It's a really exciting tool. It's something that's been a long time coming. I just want to thank Brett and the folks at CFRI and in particular the GIS team at the State Forest Service have spent a pretty sizable amount of work has gone into this, and as you can hear, there's a sizable amount of work ahead. So, but it's a really exciting tool. It will very transparently, very clearly, and very much to some degree in real time keep the residents, of the state aware of how we're investing all of the different resources that are coming forward, and then hopefully be able to demonstrate how those resources are having really positive impacts. A map, right, tells a much better story than a narrative, and acres treated versus volume sold versus, acres burned is way easier to be translated, again, when people can kind of see it within the geographic scope of where it's occurring and then in relation to their own lives. That's really, really exciting.
Can I say one more thing?
Please.
Too? I do wonder if, so if we have data next spring, maybe this council can try and make it a point that in our presentation to the Wildfire Matters Review Committee next summer, we highlight and summarize data from the Forest Tracker.
I think that's a great idea. I was actually just thinking about that, to make sure they're aware of the tool, but maybe give them hard copies and show some of that data. I agree with you. I think that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm also curious, because this was brought up, as you know, Larimer County, we had kind of a meeting, we were talking about this, doing something on we were last year talking about doing something on our own, and this is all happening kind of at the same time. I think great minds think alike. The OEM brought up a point, or our emergency services, if they know where things were treated, and we have another big fire, heaven forbid, like Camera Peak, and it's running, if they know where to kind of direct it because they know there's like a Shambhala or something that's been treated, that they could slow down the pace, or send it towards, I mean, whatever they can, but send it towards areas that have been treated, which would help them contain it. Is that something that has been discussed, or other people brought up about that also being used as a tool?
Yes, fire managers that I've talked to are very interested in this. I'll recognize the previous two iterations that CFRI led were led by Mike Caggiano, who is now with the Forest Service Regional Office, and he is the fire analyst for the region. That is the point person when a fire starts. They talk to him of what data do we have to help inform the fire incident commanders. And so he was one of the originators of this. We're still in communication, and he's really excited to incorporate that from the Forest Service Incident Command information flow perspective. So I think before we move on to, I want to acknowledge Ethan's comment in the chat. I just saw that about different kinds of forest management activities having different outcomes. And our first goal is to get the data turned around and out as quickly as possible. So it's just out there as a resource. But another thing that you will see in the concept paper is CFRI will lead some of those effects analysis on looking more at, once we have the polygons and a little bit of information of what happened in there, using some remote sensing techniques or other kinds of science-based techniques to try and learn a little bit more about what actually happened in those areas. The data, as we're collecting it from past experience, we know it's really hard to get that from the written documentation of exactly what happened and what the goals and objectives are, and if those goals and objectives were achieved. Everyone does that in a different way. It's not standardized. It's really hard to track. So we're going for basic information in the database, and then going to add some research and monitoring using other tools on top of that once we know what happened where.
Any final comments? As I want, yet again, move us forward. Again, it's just to really say that nexus between monitoring and data gathering and representation is another really huge step, I think, for the state. There are a lot of folks that are deeply curious about why we make the choices that we do. And then they're equally as curious about the choices that we're making as managers leading to the results on the ground. And I think it's a fair question. And I'm glad we're moving in a direction where we can answer it in a more forceful and transparent way. So moving on, the other day, the two topics I had for leveraging resources was the advisory role on the forest tracker, which we just concluded, and then the pre-fire playbook update. And I was curious to know who was taking that one.
I am, yeah. So I'm filling in behind Chair Amy Moyer. So I've been nominated the chair for the Leveraging Resources Subcommittee, and just want to take the time to thank the committee members. And we've had some great productive meetings and made a lot of progress. So just want to thank the committee members and recognize their efforts. So the primary topic we've been discussing is the Forest Resilience Guide. And to give a little background for folks on the council, this was something the committee has been talking about having for communities. Basically, this originated from a post-fire playbook that was developed. And so there was a need identified for a pre-fire playbook, but we wanted to make it more holistic and focus on forest health, forest resilience. So we're calling it the Forest Resilience Guide. The committee members drafted an outline that then went to the State Forest Service to hopefully put forth a scope of work, which is drafted now, and a request for proposals to hire someone to complete the guide by June 2024 is the proposed timeframe. So just want to recognize too, huge thanks to the Colorado State Forest Service who has found funding for this effort. So thank you, State Forest Service, for that. And specifically, thank you to Diana, who has worked on the actual scope of work from the outline that the committee has put forth. So we're hoping that this can kind of fill that need, that communities who are searching for resources on how to get started on implementing forest health projects, programs, that this can be useful for that. So one example that I want to share that Brett actually shared is the Roaring Fork folks, where they have specifically requested State Forest Service and Colorado Forest Restoration Institute for exactly this guide, where communities and a lot of smaller stakeholder groups just want to get started. And so they a lot of times will reach out, and we're hoping this guide can be a great resource for those communities. So I'll pause there and see if anyone has any questions specific to the guide, and then I'll just give some general updates about the subcommittee. Okay, thank you.
Oh, we have one from Ethan.
Will this enumerate specific strategies, or is this more of a guidebook in terms of setting up community funds to accomplish work? So is it a guiding document for communities themselves, or is it a guiding document for the forest management that resilience entails? I just wanted to clarify.
I think it could be, it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit more broad. So from my understanding, from what the committee's original thought was, is it's going to be more of that community-based kind of standing up collaborative. This is based on the stages of collaboration, stages of collaborative readiness that Colorado Forest Restoration Institute and folks worked on. And so I do see it from the vision of the subcommittee as more just helping communities get started, kind of grassroots, rather than like prescriptive implementation for projects. So, but that being said, I think that we as the subcommittee just developed kind of like a rough skeleton outline. So Diana is working on the scope of work, and I think that there will be a lot more discussion as this gets drafted. So certainly welcome any feedback or thoughts on the scope and the purpose and need. Any other comments on the playbook from the subcommittee members that I missed? Okay, awesome. So just to wrap up, some things that the committee has also just initially talked about is this concept of case studies, success stories as part of this playbook to demonstrate kind of how what success looks like in some communities. So I think there is just some initial discussion about that around this playbook or the Forest Resilience Guide. And next steps. So we're going to be some members of the subcommittee, Brett, myself, Katie, will be supporting the Colorado State Forest Service with the request for proposals and the scope of work. Diana has submitted a draft scope of work, so we're reviewing that and providing comments to her by the end of the month. And then our next meeting, we've invited Utah, someone from Utah, to talk about their similar database or forest tracker, like what Brett described. So the subcommittee is going to see how other states are using these kinds of tools. So Utah is on the agenda for the November meeting, and we're hoping to get California on board at a future meeting as well. So I'll pause there, see if there's any more comments from the committee members or if there's questions from folks. All right, thank you very much.
Hey, thanks, Christina, and all the folks serving on the Leveraging Resources Committee. Moving to our next agenda item, we'll get an update from the Legislative Committee, and that will be our chair, Commissioner Shattuck.
Thank you, Director McCombs. I'm Mr. Chair for today. I really want to as Christina and Brett talked about, want to thank our committee members. I have two of them here in person, and want to thank them for their work. And Director McCombs, we meet pretty much almost every other Friday. We're kind of taking a little break, but everyone's been, we have a consistent, strong core group, and we have done a lot of work, had a lot of conversations, and met a lot, as you know, over the summer to get ready for the Wildfire Interim Committee to help provide some of those recommendations that the full council approved. And I just want to thank them for just the great conversations and being engaged and asking great questions. It's a fantastic group, and I boast about it all the time. It's just such a great, diverse perspectives and roles, and we all come together and focusing on that one goal. And it's just, I just really enjoy it. It's great to wake up in the morning and say, I can't wait for this meeting to happen. So, so we have, I wanted to start first with, we have the Wildfire Interim our Wildfire Matters Review Committee will vote on October 31st next week to advance 5 bills. And right now, through individual members, may continue with some of the other concepts for the legislative session, but they have their top 5 they have to advance on October 31st. So some of the concepts that they have focused on is first the biochar study, the comprehensive study on the uses and economics of biochar as a method of removing woody biomass from the forest, and working with the State Forest Service and CSU with that. And I think we had a question still. I don't know if we're going to ask that or clarify if that's just focusing only on biochar, or that was just biomass, more of a scope. So I don't know if we have those answers.
I don't think we have those answers. I think there are some other stakeholders who would like that bill to be expanded to biomass more generally. So we'll have to see what happens.
So that's one, I think I've had that question a lot. So, and then we have the one that did come from our list of 5 was the pilot program on the slash days. And thank you, Angela and others. We've been trying to clarify what that kind of looks like. It's kind of that the pilot program to bring industry, local governments and nonprofits and private landowners together for local ideas to bring this forward to get the biomass off the landscape. So that's the other one that's still being developed. We have the Colorado State Forest Service develop standards for wildfire mitigation efforts supported by state funding, requiring that they are based on best practice, best available science and ecological restoration strategies. And we also have the continued funding for Senate Bill 2207. If you're not, just to bring you up and make you aware of that, that was a bill that was passed requiring the Colorado State Forest Service to convene working group that includes Division of Fire Prevention and Control in the Department of Public Safety and the United States Forest Service and other local partners engaged in wildfire mitigation in Louis, and they considered conducting enhanced outreach campaigns. I think this is during the Wildfire Awareness Month in 2023 and 24, and I think this is extensive funding and work. And this is kind of the Live Wildfire Ready and some of that program for anyone that's not thinking, what bill was that? And what does that look like? So, but I think that's been everywhere I go, I see it. It's great.
I have stickers.
I will take some more stickers. And so encouraging local jurisdictions to have pet-friendly shelters. I think that's is that for the evacuations? Not everyone has a place or designated place. For us in Lerner County, we usually have the ranch or our complex out there, but sometimes if we have something closer, but I think this is requiring other jurisdictions to look into that. There's a state funded program for first responders from multiple employee health benefits trust, and a representation, a bill looking at representation for advisory boards and task forces for tribal and disability communities. There's a bill or a concept for incentives for collaboration between federal, state, and local agencies for fire mitigation projects and programs, including NGOs and the FireWise information. There's an incentive to promote the timber industry, kind of the return of the House Bill 2211-66 that was, I think, tabled last year or went into don't get on the calendar, or where it went in on the
Yeah, I missed last session.
Yeah, I'm not thinking
that it died. I can't
It
remember.
died. I just don't know if it went,
purposeful
just
or
didn't get
just
on the
ran out of
calendar,
time.
or just kind of stalled. So, then we have the wildfire cameras return of the House Bill 221146. And so those are the concepts that they've been talking about. As you can see, there's some of our concepts that we had were like a continuing good neighbor authority stuff. You don't see that in here, so I'm not sure we're having conversation. I don't know if we should have conversations as a full council about that or not. And then, so those are, I think once we get that information about which 5 bills are advancing, we can probably send a report out to the council right off the bat. We're not meeting next week as a legislative committee. We're gonna wait till the 17th, November 17th. We're already planning for 2025. So what we did the last few weeks as the legislative committee is we kind of we felt last year we felt pretty rushed trying to get our speakers and our concepts and our ideas to kind of get ready for the recommendations for 2024. So we kind of backwards planned where we have what days were kind of like the governor's budget and other budgets are what's the word I'm looking for? The questions asked for what would cost what and concepts and stakeholdering. So we looked at those dates and areas and then backward plan when we should have speakers, when we need to kind of convene and have deliberation to kind of come forward with our recommendations to the full Forest Health Council. So we weren't having that extra meeting and kind of trying to cram in our deliberation. And so that's really gone well. And we have kind of a calendar in place, and I'd be more than happy to share that with the full council if they're interested in it. And so in case you're interested in some of the speakers too, this will also give staff and all this a little more time to get speakers and plan for that and be able to ask further ahead for some of the subject matter experts we asked to come talk to us about some of these topics. And so we've already started some of those meetings. We've had Whitney Johnson from the Gates Family Foundation to come talk about cross-laminate timber and other timber products. It was a high-level conversation, kind of similar to what we had heard here at the Full Forest Health Council. And we've asked them for any policy recommendations or ideas they have. And so they're going to come back on November 17th and give some of those recommendations for us. And we're already, I guess, kind of exciting. We're already planning for 2025 session and some, looking at some, what does it look like? So but it's going to be interesting for us as something new because we're going to, kind of like last year, we're kind of trying to plan for the next session, but also what bills and how we're going to track along and support as we go forward. So we're going to be kind of balancing and having our meetings balanced between the current session and what we're advocating and working for, and then also how we get these subject matter experts and come up with these concepts to bring back to the full Forest Health Council for approval. So I have to, and on that note, last year it was requested, I think, by Commissioner Layton to have little reports back if we did have something we changed, like some amendments had gotten changed or we had voted to support a change or do something that have been different from the Full Forest Health Council, because the way the session runs, it's very quick and we have to kind of stay up, kind of trying to catch up with the bills. And so we did send 2 of those reports. And I just was wondering from the Full Forest Health Council, did you find those reports, the structure and information and how we handled that? Was that helpful? Was that what you're looking for? Is there any suggestions or curiosities if they wanted more information? We tried to make them short and brief. We didn't have any votes that were divided. They were all unanimous votes. So that's how we kind of followed with that new charter and the bylaws for us to kind of, if it was unanimous vote, we could go ahead and move with that amendment change. So other than that, we're just waiting to see how next week turns out. So any questions, and would love to have the feedback on the reports that I think we sent out 2. So any questions, comments? Maybe those were
I guess my question is, when did you send those reports out? Since I'm new, I don't know if I received the reports or not.
So that was back in the last
Last
session. Mhm. Yeah, after our May, we had a meeting in May in Larimer County. We had voted on that change in those reports, so they came out at the end of the session. And so,
I think the reports have been useful. I recall, and Commissioner Layden brought up a while ago, how do we, as a full council, or is this the role of the full council to inform if you're planning for 2025, kind of what topics you're even going to develop priorities around? Because I think that was something that I heard last time, is you brought these list of 5 recommendations, but there wasn't space for the council to say, well, but what about this 6th one that you didn't even do research on over the course of the year?
and so I think that's a great point. And I think we do look at the full priorities that are approved, like the list that comes from the council that you guys, we all vote on, kind of those list of priorities. And so we kind of look at that regularly. We try to always keep that in the forefront. And we also go back and try to look at the previous conversations, because I think we'll have a different list today. And so we try to keep that other list, and then we'll look at that list. We try to keep that in front of us so that when we go back and look at what we're looking at, then we have those, we kind of use that as our guiding feedback for the council. But I would say right now we are asking for, I think from those curiosities and lists, we're asking for speakers to come on that. So if there's, I think, I'm assuming, I don't think we would take those ideas from other council members. If there's some concepts or ideas, we can add them to our list. And so we're developing that list right now. We have probably already 4 things coming where we've already have speakers. We've already got meetings planned until February. So with topics and speakers. And so it's already kind of forming up. So if you have any questions, or if there's I would certainly, meetings are always public. We welcome everyone to come in. If you have some ideas or some topics or questions you have you want to come listen in, please join us or email Courtney, and we would love to add those into our list. Because if some days it feels like this last time, we felt like we were trying to take all these concepts and squish them all into the 5, because we really felt like we had 7 or 10. And so just like looking at this list, it's like, yeah, that's great, but what about these and these? And so, you know, I don't think we want to keep recreating the wheel. We're trying to keep, you know, our previous conversations and the previous information and those surveys from the full council kind of in the forefront. I think we try to do that every time. So
great.
Would it be helpful if we don't already do this, to send out an email for who the speaker or the upcoming speaker might be, so that if anybody wants to listen in, they can?
Yeah, we could do that.
Well, I just wanted to add, this is Abe. I am just incredibly amazed by my commissioner colleague, Jody Shaddock McNally, and no flattery ever. I'm always pretty direct, and your passion and your heart to serve, you know, the entire state on this important issue is really impressive. I really thought the reports were fantastic. And, you know, in concert with our Douglas County Wildfire Initiative, you know, my priorities continue to be prescribed burns and helping private property owners in rural communities mitigate their densely, you know, wooded lands with incentives. And we have those programs up and running. In our neck of the woods in Douglas County, we just did a prescribed burn that was really successful. So those 2 remain top of mind, and I can't always get to everything, but I really appreciate the reports and the hard work of this committee. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Any other final comments or thoughts for our legislative committee? And then I have here the Ledge Committee charter reviews. That's something we need to conduct.
I don't know that we need to sort of go through it all, but maybe just a reminder, in the meeting information that was sent last week, there was attached the legislative committee charter that was approved last year. I encourage everyone to review that if you have not already, because it provides detailed clarity on how the legislative committee can operate and will operate during the legislative session. So for example, if there are amendments that they are proposing or would like to support potentially for bills, it has sort of the procedures through which you do that. So I don't think we need to spend time on it in the meeting today, but if you're wondering, and especially for members of the legislative committee, how do I operate during the ledge session with respect to my relationship with the full council, please review that because I think it provides clarity.
And I think it's great that, and I want to thank the full council for approving that because that gave us that flexibility at the end of session to move along with some amendments. Otherwise, we would have had to be silent during at the end of the session. And so I think we would have, I know silent, but we wouldn't have been able to, either disapprove or approve of amendments. So I'm glad that the reports were helpful and I appreciate staff helping us get those pulled together and everything. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Commissioner, for your leadership on that committee. As Commissioner Layton was saying, and I really think as this group continues to find its footing, we're going to be really impactful in shaping meaningful policy for Colorado. And so that's what we're supposed to be doing, and that's moving policy in the right direction. So I'm going to use the privilege of the chair. We'll just take a break here so that our next agenda item isn't bifurcated by a break. So let's take a 10-minute break. We'll be back at 10:27, please. All right, folks, let's get back to work. So our next agenda item is we're going to review the priority duties survey results that y'all participated in, as well as tee up another conversation around one of the components of our work under statute is the 30-year vision. And so it's something we sort of took a step back from last year. We want to revisit that concept again and get the sense of the group to guide our work for this current year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Courtney, who will take us through the priority duty survey results.
Yeah, thanks, Director McCombs. So the council has 10 statutorily defined duties, which is a lot to focus on, which is why each year we've been sending out these surveys so that the council can really narrow in on the duties that seem most important to them in that current year. I sent out a survey about a month ago. quite a few people filled it out, maybe half, but that's why we're also going to have a conversation about it today to sort of refine the priorities for 2024. A few of the duties I pulled out of the survey because they were more process-based, one that might be like advising the legislature on forest health issues. And that's what the legislative committee is already doing. So I didn't think we needed to vote on that one in particular, but I sent out a survey with these following duties, and I won't read through them all, but we can read through the ones that came out on top. But we had the development of a 30-year vision, landscape scale state priorities, monitoring trends related to forest health and climate, supporting forest-based collaboratives, strategy development for growing capacity, workforce development, and woody biomass. So if Angela, you want to go to the next slide. This is where the survey results came out for the folks that filled out our survey. The number one duty was quite clearly strategy development for growing capacity. So most specifically, this says the identification of strategies for building sustained capacity to conduct forest restoration and wildfire mitigation work at scale through collaboration across multiple agencies, organizations, and jurisdictions, public-private partnerships, innovative public and private funding vehicles, shared stewardship, and other solutions, with emphasis on leveraging and maximizing the impact and reach of state funding. So in the survey that came out on top, and then our next three priorities tied at landscape scale state priorities, forest health and climate trends, workforce development. And the 30-year vision came in right under that, very, very close. And so I wanted to just open it up to the council for you all to decide. I mean, that's still quite a few priority duties to hold for 2024. So would you like to refine it more? It's up to you all how many you want to select. And if you want to follow the survey completely, or since some people didn't have the chance to vote, if you guys want to have a conversation about it. And then we also wanted to tee up a conversation about the 30-year vision, since this is one of the duties that has a really clear deliverable. You know, it's the development of a product, whereas some of these other ones we have touched on through the legislative committee or the leveraging resources committee. So just want to open it up for discussion about the results of the survey and then the 30-year vision in particular. And Angela or Matt, if I missed anything, please fill in.
No, really, this is the will of the council as it relates to what you want to focus on in the out year, and as well as, yeah, I think we need to have a thoughtful discussion about what does it look like to think about 30 years in the future, and how can we put strategies in place that allow us to monitor that success and continue moving that direction. So with that, feedback.
So I have some quick feedback real quick. Well, not probably real quick. I have a couple points I want to.
We have a lot of time.
We
have an hour.
So they did leave good agenda time.
Right. So I was like, well, this should not, because this is an important one, I feel. And I'm thinking, you know, there's some information we need to gather to people who are trying to develop that. So is that kind of the first step we need to talk about, is how do we find the information? I think it's out there, but how do we gather that first to figure out what that vision might be? And so do we need to just take that first step of having a subcommittee to kind of bring that all together? And I think we've already taken some of that step, because I think some of those directives we came out of the recommendations from the Legislative Council. There was 3 or 2 we had, and one of them talked about vapor pressure deficit and climate related things. And I think that for me needs to be part of this vision. And so do we need to get some of that information gathered before we start trying to form a plan? And so that's my first thought, is do we have the information we need to even start? Do we need to get some awareness? I mean, a lot of the people in the room probably have a lot of that more fluency or more background than someone like me. I feel like I'm gaining more every time I spend even a couple of minutes with any of you. You all have bring such great expertise and perspectives. So I think some of those are kind of related. And so also Perry, that 30-year strategy also has workforce and some of these landscape things in it. So I feel like that high level kind of incorporates some of the others. And so I just kind of wanted to point that out, my thoughts on that. And then the woody biomass, I'm always interested that it seems every year that doesn't get a high rating, but it dominates our conversations. And so, you know, that's, for me, it feels like it dominates our conversations wherever I go, and even in our legislative committee. So is that not a priority? But then we keep talking about, we need to solve it. So I'm always find that, because last year it didn't get ranked that high either. So I'm curious about that and see, do we not follow the results and make that up? I don't know. So those are my first two thoughts.
Thanks, Commissioner. Mark, go ahead.
Yes, Commissioner Shattuck McNally, I couldn't agree more. To me, looking at these priorities, how we're going to handle woody biomass is going to affect what we do for a 30-year plan. It's going to see what scale we operate on. It's going to affect almost all the others. Lately, we seem to be fixated on removing biomass from the forest rather than manipulating it. When you remove it, you use fossil fuels to harvest it, you use fossil fuels to transport it, fossil fuels for secondary manufacture, secondary transportation of the product. And to me, we need to take a real hard look at what level of biomass can be left on the forest, as that's going to tell you what all these other capacities that you're trying to build are going to look like to me. And I think that's a real important one, because when we try to implement all these other things that we're attempting to do, we always come back to woody biomass and how much of it we're going to have and where we're going to leave it. And I'm a opponent of dealing with that, pushing it real hard, because I think there's a huge economic component there, and how much you can accomplish by what you're gonna do with it. So I guess those two to me are tied together. Woody biomass, forest fuels manipulation is going to frame how you do the rest of your work.
I mean, the woody biomass problem has been a perennial challenge, right? And that's why it probably drops on the list, because people don't, understand how to crack the nut. But I mean, the bottom line is if you look at other states and how they've had success, it's subsidies. And I don't know, what kind of opportunities there are in the state, but it's if we were serious about it, that's where you go.
Well, that's kind of why I brought up that pilot slash day programs, is hoping that maybe private industry and all these groups would come together in a local, smaller scale, and maybe there would be some kind of interesting partnership or incentive to do something, more locally, and then see if that any of those ideas that are already happening, but bubble up for maybe more scaling up solutions. So it's just something I think it never ranks well, but I still feel like it has to be kind of a higher discussion priority to kind of put in that plan, because it's something that kind of is woven in all these other priorities. So
I mean, that's a good way to look at it. I mean, biomass can have community-based solutions. If you look at like the Scandinavian model, man, they got biomass facilities, like small ones all over the place instead of bigger ones far between. I mean, it's an economy of scale thing. But again, without some sort of subsidy for either the actual product or industry or something, industry's struggling right now in general, right? And it's, it goes to the point we just made about leaving what do you leave on the landscape? What do you take out? I mean, there's a balance, right? I mean, we can't leave it all out there, but there's a balance that I think without some form of subsidy, it's going to be challenging to address.
Thank you for that President. It's important to think about.
Yeah, when we think about that, it's also, folks that are, at least I try to keep putting in the conversation, what are we trying to achieve here? There's some interesting dialogue around, so what's the appropriate balance of treatment, like of how specific treatments we put on the landscape. So there's perspectives that are I don't think in natural conflict, but they're sort of trying to move Colorado's models towards some level of predictability about like what we're going to do, right? and how. And there's the tension there lies in like, are we going to get into an unholy alliance with industry, right? And then that's when I talk about return intervals and how fast our trees grow. What we're really trying to accomplish here, and that's the pivot here, is that, you know, the presence of woody biomass utilization capacity and all of its characterizations is lower cost per acre treatments. And where we're sending the majority of our resources as a state is in treatment cost offsets through matched programming and direct payments to folks to incentivize work. So what we're really trying to do is create another component of that chain, that value chain, to continue to create places where we can divert the material to a commercial enterprise that then offsets the cost for the treatment so that we can do more. So when we talk about subsidy, I think people are like, ugh. And really what I'm talking, I think we should, you know, consider is how do we continue to lower the cost per acre by creating wood utilization capacities, and then place that thinking in this bucket of like, those are not subsidies, those are just additional investments in treatment costs, you know, in this, I don't know, maybe that's not the right way to think about it, but it does help people get over the hump of like, if we build all this capacity, we're gonna have to feed it forever. And that could, you know, creates these perspectives in people's minds about unsustained yields and such over time. And that, I think it's like, what we're really trying to do is have modalities available to send fiber that then create some economic incentive to lower the cost per acre. And that, I hope, I throw it out there because I'm actually just curious to know, do people in this table and in this call feel the same way?
Well, I mean, from the Forest Service perspective, we call it as a wildfire crisis strategy. And woody biomass is a big issue for that crisis. And so we're not treating it like a crisis. When the airline industry goes bankrupt, we bail them out. I mean, we should be, you know, creating an infrastructure that supports what we have that can treat and expand that. And so I get
almost as a public service,
yeah,
not as an economic price.
Don't call it a subsidy, call it, you know, some kind of benefit. I don't know, we'd have to think about that, but I mean, I think
Public safety.
Yeah, public safety.
Watershed protection.
Right. But we just have to somehow push it across the finish line where we're just kind of flipping the narrative a little bit.
No, I'm with you. Other thoughts? I can't see hands because we have this graphic up, so. Mr. Morgan, go ahead.
Yes, you're spot on with managed acres. We're in the Colorado Forest Health Council, and we want the most vibrant and resilient and managed forest that we can get. And oftentimes woody biomass or woody manipulation, fuels manipulation, is generally significantly lower cost, and you can do more acres than many of your harvested removal programs. I'm in the woody biomass business for about half of my business, and we work really hard at recovering and using these products, but still in the end, you can do fuels manipulation, which goes to your forest health goal and your reduced wildfire goal, usually quite a bit cheaper than you can even for the value of the products, remove it from the forest. So I think in your balancing act there, I still think you have to come back to forest manipulation or fuels manipulation as a way to reduce your cost, to expand the acres, to get more management and get more public safety.
In order to keep the conversation going, I want to, any other comments? Were you about to say something, Smith?
Well, I want to go back to your point. You know, we talk about woody biomass so often, and yet it's very interesting to see how it's being prioritized. But after hearing some remarks, it seems like it's a capacity issue, obviously a funding issue. And to me, it seems like this thought about strategy development for growing capacity, I mean, all these fit under that. And I wonder if that's how we're thinking about this. And maybe we need a little reframe, because this all makes sense to me that woody biomass would be a major focus. So maybe kind of like a multi-legged stool under that strategy for capacity.
It's kind of the operational piece of the other stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think I really like what you said there. The council's will was to develop a strategy, and mechanical forest management woody biomass utilization is one component of many
Right.
in forest management activities that happen, right? As well as natural disturbances and things. And so it's a critically important one that we want to be able to do forest management where we want to do it and the way we want to do it. And sometimes cost gets in the way of that, but it's not the only thing that we do. And it's not, we can't rely on that to solve all of our problems. And so I think that's where the will of the council was voting more for a whole strategy and how does mechanical forest management in general, and then within that forest biomass utilization, right? They're sort of stacked.
Yeah, I mean, Brad, the way I look at it is mechanical manipulation as a means to get fire back on the landscape. That's all it is.
I'm saying the same thing, that like there's years of mechanical treatments in front of us, in particular in the WUI, that need to be accomplished in order to restore fire to its natural, and then theoretically create the security status in the mind of this average resident that we can achieve that without impacting their own livelihoods or the values that they have. And so, yeah, I think that's where we're at in Colorado is let's really focus in the and especially in the wildland crisis strategy, Polygon in particular, like let's do what we said we were going to do, which was to arrest some of the challenges affected that are present in the WUI in particular, and then branch that out in watersheds, acknowledging that we are continually drifting more and more to this idea that a core value at risk within a community's jurisdiction is its water supply. And so beyond that, the backcountry really slips into the federal estate, and how do you want to effectively change conditions at a much larger scale? But we do have some great places where we could focus if we wanted to develop a strategy around these things that are truly right in front of us, which is a lot of exposed communities, a lot of exposed watersheds.
So
Go
ahead, Mark Morgan.
I would never suggest for a second that is the only tool that we should use, or fuels manipulation. I have always been a proponent of we keep every tool in the toolbox and we use them all. I just would hate to see a lot of money and treasure spent on removing biomass that I think you're going to have a tough time doing it on a scale large enough. And then it has a whole nother set of problems. And I really want to stress the point that you need every tool in the toolbox. We're going to need control burns. We're going to need fuels manipulation. I just think, as you were talking about the relative costs, you can do a lot of fuels manipulation work on the ground in that $300 to $700 an acre range, and many of your stewardship contracts and stuff are well over $2,000 an acre right now. And if we're talking about getting acres managed on a landscape scale to reduce fire, I'm just saying, don't throw fuels manipulation out. It seems to be a trend lately to go away from that. And I guess the case I'm making for here is not to be the dominant tool in the toolbox, but dang sure keep it in the toolbox.
It looks like Commissioner Layden's hand is up, but we can't see it.
Oh, that might have been a lingering hand, but I'll ring in, and I couldn't agree more with a lot of the comments here. But for me, and I think for us in an area that's 50% open space, we're seeing a lot of success with we love our forests, we love the trees, but if we continue to permit overgrowth and kindling ultimately for wildfires, then we're not doing right by those we serve. And most of our open space abuts, $1 million, $10 million homes. And so the potential for property damage is just astronomical. And it's not a partisan issue. I mean, I work at the National Association of Counties with commissioners on the very far left from Paradise, California, that beg and plead, please, please, please mitigate your forests, control the overgrowth, do the prescribed burns, because they didn't, and they allowed their forest to become overgrown, and it just ultimately caught fire. So that's my biggest concern is, our citizens and preserving the amazing forest that we have.
Thanks, Commissioner, for those comments. Ethan, you got your hand up.
I wanted to go back to something I heard Mark say and ask for a little bit more clarity. When you say you see people moving away from fuels mitigation, I just that caught me by surprise. And so I wanted to see what you really meant by that. Yeah.
Not fuels mitigation, but many of the solutions that are being proposed right now, many of the contracts that we're doing, they want extremely low fuel loads left on the ground. They want perfect is the enemy of good. When you spend a whole lot of money removing every last bit of fuel rather than possibly masticating or mulching some of the material, it drives your costs way up. And so right now on some typical contracts up on the Arapahoe Roosevelt National Forest, I question them quite pointedly. And their goal is for 6 tons per acre or less fuel remaining on the ground on federal Forest Service projects. That's ridiculously low. And the cost of getting there is really high. Their contracts are running in the $2,500, $2,700, $2,900 an acre range, where if you backed off from that a ways, you could manage a whole lot more acres with, there are acceptable fuel loads, and the scientific evidence is out there that your fuel load, if it's masticated or down on the ground, could be 3-4 times that. And I would be happy to show you or provide some of the if you take 60 tons per acre fuel loading and you were to spread it like butter over the entire acre and chipped it, your chip depth would be under 2 inches. That's an extreme case. But if you took an entire, essentially forest stand, which in northern Colorado here, 60 tons per acre is a fairly dense stand, and you took no products out of it, and you chipped the whole thing and put it on the ground, you're at 2 inches. So when you're talking about 6 tons per acre, that's a ridiculously low standard. And it's far more than you need to meet your fuels goals. And I think there's some middle ground in there that could really help drive down your costs and still meet your goals. Does that answer your question of where I'm coming from?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So I think just because in the interest of time, because we were hoping to talk a little bit about the long-term vision, what strikes you about the data from your own survey, and how does this group propose, or is there anyone proposals folks would like to make as it relates to how we want to prioritize our time spent on key issues associated with our statutory responsibilities? That hopefully is the takeaway today.
This is, I want to go back to kind of what maybe Courtney said. This is a lot of things to consider for this coming year. And for me, we've been packing some low hanging fruit. This is a big vision. I like the idea of pulling some of these under the strategies for maybe several legs of the stool. It might be more than 3 legs on the stool here, but I'm wondering, I go back to, we've got to take those first steps. So maybe we need to get this information. We have those directions and we're gathering all this information. Maybe we need to really identify what we need to have in that plan and then try to gather some information and then start working on it. So maybe we need to talk about what should be in that 30-year vision, whether is it all of these, and do we talk about the capacity, maybe these are all those things that should be in the plan, and maybe we need to look intentionally gathering information for, as you said, right in front of us. We need to maybe make that a priority and spell that out, tackle that in this plan, and then also talk about in the long term, because I think that long term has got some kind of form, but it's less defined because we really have this crisis. I agree with you. It's a crisis that we need to really address now. And I think maybe putting that in a plan and saying it, maybe it's instead of talking about subsidies, we change this messaging. Maybe this is our messaging too, to push the urgency and what we think needs to happen. Because we're talking about all this stuff that we could put into, I mean, this plan is also, to me, a call to action or a messaging thing as well. So maybe we need to go ahead and, I mean, we kind of punted this one, but maybe we need to go ahead and just start getting at least a outline and then gather that information. And because even today, I heard some statements you have made and others have made that we could put in the document. So I don't think we need to start, I don't think we need to recreate the wheel. I think we already have a lot of the elements, but just my thoughts.
I appreciate that, Commissioner. So you're, just to characterize, you're thinking of using the sort of the top 30-year vision as the umbrella and then building out specific change, like naming the delta, like it's, you know, here's what it looks like now, here's what it looks like when it's changed into something that is equals the outcome that this group would advocate for, kind of under each heading would be a way to move forward. Other thoughts? And then I didn't finish that statement. And then with each one of those, there would be a data gathering, information gathering component. So maybe the council could then feedback into staff. Here's the key questions I have about each one of these topical areas in statute. And then we could maybe work on formulating a process by which to start gathering that information for you.
And I think that would be great. I mean, I hear kind of maybe from you all that we have to start and get this maybe gathered. This is also something to help inform the Welfare Interim Committee and the legislature and the governor, you know, for what kind of track or trajectory on. But I also think we should spell it out in this 30-year vision. Like you said, there's work right now that is critical that we need to accomplish, but it's going to take a decade to get some, or more. But so I think I really do think we have a lot of this information. We just need to start kind of just like the post fire playbook, the resiliency plan. When you first started talking about that, I was just like, oh wow, this is going to be huge. And then it just slowly pieced together, and you guys have done some phenomenal work. So I think this is something we could kind of, I think we could get, it doesn't be perfect. We could still refine it every year, right? And I'm wondering if that's what's also stopping us, because we're like, wow, that's a big thing to do. Maybe we just need to start with something that we refine. I mean, not every month, but you know, just something to go start.
Other thoughts? Go ahead, Christine.
I'm wondering, in my mind, I see it maybe as a parallel track where maybe the 30-year vision is one, and then the strategy that ranked as the highest priority is another, and they move together, and we sort of put everything under both of them. My immediate concern is if we lump everything or underneath the 30-year vision, that conveys, like, takes away the sense of urgency for me. You know, and do we use the one, you know, the strategies that rank the highest to help to start deliberately informing how we come up with a 30-year vision?
Thank you. Samantha.
Yeah, I like that recommendation. I also know we've done so much work, and so it almost feels a bit backwards to be like, we're doing all this and yet we don't necessarily have the North Star. I mean, we do in concept, but I'm just curious, like in that development of the 30-year vision, how the work that's already happened up till now would be identified and explained. And in theory, it would align with stuff that we've already done, but maybe we find that, oh, actually, we don't want to focus as much on that. So I'm just curious, maybe from a process perspective. Courtney, have any thoughts?
Yeah, yeah, I think there are lots of different ways you could approach it. So, you know, I think with the 30-year vision, if you went the route of sort of breaking down your vision into some of these buckets, you know, you could summarize some of the accomplishments that have already been made. You know, for example, I would think in a 30-year vision, let's go back to the language. You know, you have a lot of flexibility, right? So the language is simply developing goals and both annual and multi-year recommendations for actions to improve forest health and reduce fire risk through increased funding and capacity building. So increased funding in my mind is pretty straightforward. And I think this council's contributed to some wins on increasing funding for some existing programs already. So, and we could summarize those accomplishments. But then I think, you know, that's also a place to have that conversation. You know, is the 4 billion number that's in the Forest Action Plan from 2020, is that still sort of like about the right number that we should be talking about in terms of need? So just, and we could have some presentations on that, right? And then, and I think, you know, we always have conversations about sustained funding and the importance of that. So I think the funding piece is pretty simple. I think the capacity building is what you make it. So, you know, I think there are just so many ways to think about capacity, whether it's workforce, whether it's industrial, you know, biomass capacity, whether it's capacity within agencies, right, to leverage different public funding sources. So that one's more amorphous, and you could tackle it, sorry, getting over a cold. You could tackle it by sort of doing that parallel track that Krista suggested. So just one idea.
So we'll go to Julie, and then we'll go to Mark. Julie.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to weigh in on the discussion regarding the 30-year vision and where are the priorities. I mean, what I think I'm taking out of today's discussion, which I have found extremely valuable, is it sounds like as we're thinking about the 30-year vision, at least in my mind, it seems as though the council needs to align first and foremost on what is the current state, right? Where are we on a variety of these priorities that are listed in the 30-year vision? Identify what the gaps are to get from current state to what the future ideal state looks like for the 30-year vision, and then use that to inform both the short-term priorities and the development of the long-term vision. Because I think when I think of things like how does workforce development plug in, how does capacity plug in, what do we do with the woody biomass? In my mind, that's a two-part question. It's first, what do we need? Where are we in the current state, and what do we need in the short term to fill gaps? And then how does that inform getting us to a longer term goal? Because what we need in terms of workforce to address the current state and get us in a better position may look different over the long term. If we change the way things look and we address priorities and fill the gaps, long term workforce and other things may be level set and just right. So I guess that's how I'm viewing what we're talking about, which changes the priorities in my mind versus what I saw on the survey output. I think sometimes trying to address some of the smaller things is knee-jerk, when the bigger question, I think, will help inform some of the more immediate term problems.
Thank you, Julie. Mark, and then Christina, you had your hand up as well. Is that right? Okay, we'll go to Mark and then to Christina.
Julie, I couldn't agree more. I think what we're talking about here is forest triage, and we have to pick the sickest or the most critical items, and it's a combination. Some of these are absolutely critical, as many people in this meeting have brought up. We need to address something on the ground right now and then build capacity and everything. But I think right now it really is a triage, and I think the state has done some great work in developing the mapping tools and risk tools that have been presented to us. And I think it's a case of our approaches will be different if we've got a 30-year plan, or we're dealing with a 100-year resource rotation. So you can pick any outdated term, outlying term you want for years, but you've got right now crises, right now problems. And then if we start to find successful solutions for those problems, then our goals and our needs are going to change if we build on our successes. So I think your comments are exactly correct in that we need to bring it along, start somewhere, start on the critical items, get some movement on them, and that's going to change what our goals are going to look like. It's not going to be a steady thing. Each year is not going to be the same as the last year if we're successful.
Thanks, Mark. Christina.
Sorry, my hand was raised for a while, so I have a couple comments going back to the woody biomass. Real quick.
Very good.
And then I also have some thoughts about the 30-year vision and things. So going back to woody biomass, just want to remind everyone that there are two groups that we could definitely take advantage of and leverage, which is the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative Biomass Utilization Committee. They've been meeting regularly for years, and I think are trying to address some of the challenges with that. So just want to throw that out there, as well as kind of the newly formed Colorado Mass Timber Coalition that Commissioner Shattuck McNally mentioned through Gates. So that I feel like has some momentum. So just, I think that there's some groups that we could absolutely leverage if that was named as a priority or something that this council wanted to work on. And moving on to the 30-year vision, I fully support that. I think that I would feel good walking away from my term at the Forest Health Council knowing that was something that I contributed to. So just me personally, I think that there's a lot of value in that. I think that it would help the state. I also think that it would be a huge advantage for our state as well. So I do support that. And I like the idea of tackling some of the priorities as part of that 30-year vision. So I completely understand that there are things that we need to triage and things that we may need to address separately, like the capacity strategy that may be more urgent than developing this 30-year vision. And so I do want to recognize that there are some things that we may need to work in parallel, but I do find value in the 30-year vision and tackling some of those priorities as part of that. And then also I threw in the chat, one of the first questions I have is like, what do other states or communities' 30-year visions look like? And so there was just from doing a quick Google search, there was one for King County that City of Seattle had on their website, and they have a really cool fact sheet about it. So I think that that's something I'm interested in, is like, what do other 30-year visions look like? And I think the information gathering point that Commissioner Shattuck McNally brought up, I think that's really important, but just part of that formation of that vision. Thanks.
Thanks, Christina. Other thoughts? Brett, go ahead.
I'll just add, I think a 30-year vision would make all of the little things so much more powerful and impactful. If we say we have a 30-year vision and this is how biomass utilization is going to support that, and this is how this other component is going to support that, it's not, I think the sooner we get there, the better we're going to be able to advocate and talk about all of the other things that are the mechanics of how you get it done, and advocate for that on the state level at the legislature and elsewhere. Yeah, I think it's both. We have to keep working on them, but as Christina said, people have been talking about biomass utilization for years, and there's a lot of momentum now. But I think also being humble to like, are we going to solve this in the next 6 months? Maybe we can get some subsidies, but people have been working on this for like 40 years, you know? So I think there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of stuff. The more we can wrap that up into a coherent, as Samantha said, a North Star, like the state is looking to the Forest Health Council for kind of what's the North Star for Colorado and forest management. Can provide that. As far as Christina, just the state of Washington, their Department of Natural Resources has one of the best sort of statewide forest management long-term visioning plans that I've seen around. So from a county, but their state DNR is a really great one.
Maybe that's what we need to, I'm sorry, maybe that's where we need to start. We feel like we gotta start somewhere. So maybe we start with where our North Star is first. Because I don't know if we've even, I mean, Mark mentioned Huntington Health is most vibrant forest, but what does that look like? I don't know, is that something we have to recreate or we already have it on? Is it already on this here too? I don't know, so I'm just curious about that.
I was gonna ask you, maybe you're about to say this. I'm curious, Dr. McCombs, how you think your existing forest action plan fits into this conversation.
So funny, I've been writing down some things about how do we, because it's always, these kinds of conversations always like, all right, now what? So here's some things that I might throw out for feedback. One is, I sense a visioning exercise in our future, right? And really just spending some quality time talking about current condition. I mean, this is something I learned as a Forest Service employee for many years. And what's the desired future condition, right? And so the delta, what is the change that needs to occur between where we are now and where we want to be in whatever period of time we decide to assess. And the cool thing about that is that preloading for that type of exercise could be, here's where the State Forest Action Plan, which will about to be refreshed, right? We're at the end of our 5-year cycle, or we're close to the end of the 5-year cycle. So that's a great place to start. You have a brand new forest plan in on the GMUG, relatively new forest plan on the Rio. Where else do you have relatively? San Juan is yeah. So you have some good geographically bound examples of where we've already said as a people that we want to go in these areas. So maybe that could be a place to start, is that the agencies could provide in a usable format some perspectives on where we think we should be headed. What are the key deliverables associated with those documents that this group should be aware of, and then entertain an exercise where we could just ideate around this concept for a while and try to come to some consensus about the future. And then the walk back from that is plugging the gaps, like Brett said, activating all of the other components of our work within that context. I think another thing that you deserve is a report on the success of the initiatives to date. There's a lot of, like, I'm looking at this thing like there's a lot going on in that space on every single one of those headings. And so you kind of deserve a little bit of a, by these headings, report out on what the agencies are already achieving, DFPC, State Forest Service, DNR, as well as our federal partners to the extent that they'll participate. And then I think the piece that's next would be the refinement gap exercise, which somebody brought up a gap exercise, and I can't exactly remember who, but just refining those key, if we can come up with like a few things under each heading that lead to us moving from here to here, I think that's really going to guide our work, and it will simplify how we spend our time. And then you can also get to that point of like where you're checking it off. If there's nothing that feels better than like, got it, now we can move on. And then the last thing I think that would be valuable is this capture in real time. Like, two things we need to capture: the real time movements that are occurring, which is everywhere all the time because of the amount of resources in the system, and then creating space for us to be reactive, which is okay. And then that other piece is this long-term objectives. What are those actions that are in service to these long-term objectives that just come out of nowhere, like the Mass Timber Coalition was an idea until it was a multi-million-dollar initiative with every single player in the space involved. So I that's what I'm thinking is, number one is a visioning exercise that's preloaded with feedback from the agencies and the NGOs and entities that are moving in that direction, a report on success and initiatives to date, and then after those two things, a refinement gap exercise. That's a lot of time. We're not going to do this like with quarterly meetings. That's the other thing that kind of came to mind is, what are you all willing to put into this endeavor, acknowledging that the sunk costs on the front end are going to be very valuable to you on the back end, and then also acknowledging that some of you may no longer be on the council to experience those benefits. That was a lot, so I'll stop it. I just love to hear feedback. I'm just trying to sort of frame up ways that we might be able to get through this conversation into some action items that staff and agencies can go back and help support you with on. What am I not hearing, or what did I not say that you heard that needs to be captured?
Angela, could you go back to the chart? I was thinking some of the same things. I really appreciate what you said, Dr. McCombs. The support force collaboratives is the lowest by a lot. And I think a lot of that is acknowledgement of the great work that Kate McGrath Novak and people have done standing up Forest Collaboratives Network, that the council is sort of like, well, there's a lot going on there. We probably don't need as much priority. I would be really interested to hear Katie's perspective on the need to continue supporting it and not like checking it off, but how do we do that? But I think acknowledging some things that we've done there, as far as also the workforce development, I'd be really interested to follow now as the community colleges and other universities are implementing training. Like, that's not a check off, let's follow up on that. But we've already done a lot of these things. And then we mentioned the Forest Resilience Planning Guide, right? That is sort of this, both the strategy development for, like we said, how do you grow capacity in different ways and access information and set those landscape scale priorities at those more sort of regional scales.
And we
We're
also have a
working
big
towards that.
polygon, right? We also have a big federal polygon that's covered in money, right? That also I think should drive some more thinking and work as well.
So I think we are doing a lot of this, and it's doing new things, but then also let's follow up on what we've already done well.
I agree. And prescribed fire is the one that I left out. And I wanted to remind folks that like DFPC is in the process of building out an RFP to hire a contractor to lead a large statewide strategic conversation about what is the future of RX in this state and how do we activate that future once we decide what it is. And that's something the State Forest Service will be, and DNR and others will be part and parcel to, as well as this group. You know, you will be a key stakeholder body that process engages with. So that's just another piece. A lot of folks are asking that question, like, what are we doing? And it's like, well, luckily the agencies are coming together to create a forum and a format to drive that conversation towards some hard decisions and then start hustling resources, because that's going to be a big outflow of that is we need to increase substantially the workforce associated with that work. So Paige, we'll go to you and then
Julie.
Julie, thank you.
I think Julie had her hand up first.
You're welcome to defer your colleague. Yes, go ahead, Julie.
Okay. Thank you, Paige and Director McCombs. I guess I was just in comment to what you said about, you know, the exercise, right, of fleshing all this out. It could be time intensive, and how much time do we want to give it? I mean, I would just throw out there the concept that, and I don't know what we this council have for funding opportunities or how this would even work, but you know, I know in the world of private enterprise, you know, oftentimes we bring in a facilitator to help us get in a room for 2 days and tackle big things like this. And maybe that could happen in conjunction with an upcoming quarterly meeting of the council. But I think it's doable, I guess is what I would say. And I don't think it has to take weeks or months. I think it can take some focused effort. Just throwing that out there.
It would be fun too, potentially. You never know. Thank you for those comments, Paige.
Yeah, so that's part of the benefit of waiting. See, that was one of my comments too, was to say that I think that this effort could, I mean, I really like the idea of working on the 30-year vision. I do think it could serve sort of a focusing and prioritizing role for, you know, several of these efforts that are, you know, other priorities could live under that umbrella. I do think it shouldn't be something that we drag out, you know, over several meetings. I think it would be best developed in a focused, ideally facilitated effort. I think it would be best if we can really do some good research on other good state level models that are, you know, really look across multiple ownerships. So it's not just an agency plan, whether that be federal or state, but is really looking at all the interests, you know, at the state level. And then my other ask would just that we be clear, who's going to use this vision? You know, who's the audience, and are we going to be willing to, you know, any subset of us, like be willing to commit to what is identified in the vision, and how will it guide, you know, each of our entities in our work? So I think that would be a really important question going in, like who are we developing this for, and who's going to commit to the vision that we capture?
Okay, thank you, Paige, for those comments. Commissioner Lade, I believe you had your hand up.
Yeah, and I'll be brief. I just think that what I'm hearing from a consensus standpoint is a both and. I mean, it's a 30-year plan, and it's also what are our urgent action items. It's a look back at the past in terms of accomplishments, and it's also innovative ideas for the future in a non-duplicative way. So it just seems very both. I would just add, I worked with the Attorney General on the state opioid settlement, and I'm chair of that opioid council in our district. We worked with a facilitator called the Stedman Group, and in 2 4-hour sessions, the experts that were in the room, and we had about 40, developed strategies, plans, projects moving forward, and we had funding basically out the door by that second session, or at least directed in the appropriate way. So love the idea of a facilitator just kind of moving things along, because I mean, let's be practical. I don't think we're looking back to the 80s or 90s for what folks did back then. We might be a little bit, but 30 years from now, all of us are going to be gone. And I think that things get lost in between meetings. So if we have a concentrated time together with a facilitator, I think we can get a lot done. That wasn't short, sorry.
We were just all thinking, I hope I'm not gone in 30 years, but it's possible, and we should plan for it.
Well, just not on the Forest Health Council. I hope you're all here. Yeah.
We're just teasing you, Commissioner. No, I think those are helpful comments as well. Commissioner.
I just wanted to piggyback on all of that. I was also thinking about the facilitator. We're currently invited 200 people, 100 showed up for our, we're planning a new strategic plan because we've had our other one successfully is closing this year. We've got all of our objectives accomplished. And we hired this group of women, and everyone walked in, and I think some of from your office, others were in there, and we got so much great feedback. They didn't think they could pull all this information together in a 3-hour session. But now we have these strategies, and we're going to be able to get this plan. I think we did this in August or September, but we're going to have a plan and stuff ready by January from that great session, and how they facilitated and pulled all this information. And one of the things we found out is a lot of people don't understand or knew what we were already doing. And so that I think also will be great to put in for this, but also what we need to go for the next, this is just 4 years. I mean, 30 years is kind of daunting, but there's Stedman Group, there's other small groups that I don't know where the cost or who would be able to do that, but I think it might be overwhelming for all of us trying to do this work, but having someone professionally who can even sit in this room today, they could have just pulled all kinds of things together. So I think that's something actionable that we could, and I think also maybe getting us be able to review some of these other plans, maybe send out the links so we can all be looking at the same other, no sense to recreate the wheel. There's some good things out there we can learn from. So just wanted to add on.
Yeah, I don't know that we need to talk about facilitation where the council is already setting a precedent of hiring a contractor to help with the forest resilience planning. So we can do this if we want.
Yes, till there's no more HFEC left. So
yeah,
and that's something I'll talk about at the close of this, is what resources at least that we can bring to continue to sustain these efforts. Mark.
I'll try and be very brief. I think sometimes when we get involved in a group like this, as to Paige Lewis's comment, who is the audience? We serve to try to bring items to attention for the professional managers that are in this group. So I think the audience page is our legislators and Director McCombs and Director Gibbs, and I think the audience there, sometimes we get carried away about trying to influence somebody, and I think in truth we need to be provide information to let the professional managers do their work or make them aware of considerations. And I view that as my goal in this, or my place in this, and if that's incorrect, I'd like to know. But I think we do have to keep our eyes on the prize as to who the audience is, and that's a great comment. And that's who I think it is, and if it's not the case, somebody fill me in.
Maybe we should ratify that a little bit. Like, that is what the statute directs. To be clear, right?
Yeah, and Mr. Morgan, I'm not sure if you added the governor in there, but yeah, your statutory charge is to provide recommendations to the governor through the Director of Natural Resources, to the State Forest Service as part of that, and to the state legislature. So you should all feel fully empowered to do that. And, I think you have a real opportunity here with this 30-year vision to sort of, in addition to specific goals, let's say, just sort of set that vision, and if you can come to consensus around what are some things we agree upon, for the future of forests in Colorado, that messaging itself, I think, could be very powerful for legislators, for the governor, for folks who have a lot of power to make an impact in this space, but aren't necessarily experts. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Other thoughts or feedback?
I don't know if Commissioner Layton is a new judge or not.
Was that a new hand or an old hand, Commissioner Layden?
I just leave it up. I just
Yeah,
leave
yeah.
it up. It's coming down. It's coming down.
We'll just give you a high five right back. All right.
Could I frame up one
Please.
question? So I'm hearing general consensus that folks would like to move forward with a conversation about the 30-year vision, perhaps do a facilitated visioning exercise. We have a couple options in terms of timeline. I've also heard people want to get a bunch of information ahead of time, including examples of vision statements or plans like this, as well as kind of just an update on really what's been going on in the agencies, what we've accomplished in service of a bunch of these goals. So to me, that says we need at least probably 6 months to realistically get everything in order. So I think we'd be looking at either next spring to maybe do a day or 2 long workshop, maybe in place of our spring meeting, or next summer. And I know summer can get squirrely for people, but that's kind of what I'm envisioning now. Does that sound okay to people?
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. So that visioning exercise, this reports on the success initiatives, and then, the part of that visioning exercise could be a refinement or gap exercise by title. But I'm going to instruct my staff, and I would encourage the other agencies to do so, is to report out under these headings, bullet or share links under these headings, so that we're framing it within the statutorily directed buckets, so that you can also lump it in your head in those statutory buckets, and then that all will fit under that larger 30-year vision. Is that going to work for folks? Is what I want to know.
That's a good time frame, because it gives us, in all reality, once the legislative session starts, it's going to be hard to add the capacity for any of us are going to be
running in circles.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And so I think we have to kind of think about that. Also, I'm thinking that for this first kind of cycle, we kind of started this Forest Health Council 2
years ago.
This would be in that first 3-year iteration or cycle. So this would be, to me, kind of a, not check the box, but kind of a good signal that we're working, we're getting things done, especially if we're tackling something as visionary or umbrella as that. And we can say, here's the short-term successes. We've progressed on this. We have the playbook. We have the, all these things that we've gotten done in this first 3 years. I mean, I think that would be pretty exciting to have accomplished. So I think that's a great time frame.
I think it would be a good handoff too to those folks that will come on as folks leave.
And then
Director McCombs, I have one question. With the Forest Action Plan update, does that timing need to be considered at all as part of this 30-year vision, or should it just be viewed completely separate?
I would look at the work of this council as an informing tool, informing body on the refresh on the Forest Action Plan. I think you'll find the Forest Action Plan is not static, but it's long-reaching. It inherently assumes lots and lots of years will go by before the fulmination of the objectives in it occur. And so I don't see it like dramatically changing in its refresh in 2025, but it'll be informed by this group's work as well as all the other public input that we take in. But I'm even thinking about potentially carving out some space in the Forest Action Plan for the Forest Health Advisory Council's recommendations to show alignment. So those are just ways that, again, what drives me bananas is the amount of strategic work that's going on in silos in the state. And we're trying to slowly collapse all of that into as many centralized repositories as we can, such that we're all communicating at the same time and leveraging every penny that comes into the state, regardless of its origin. Does that help? Cool. All right. So go ahead. You were going to add.
Thanks. Yeah. So as we're sort of talking about priorities for next year, because as it stands now, we do only have the 4 full council meetings that we've been planning. So in January, which is our next scheduled quarterly meeting, and Courtney will speak to that a little bit here at the end of the meeting. The one agenda item we definitely have down is for Julie Shapiro from Keystone Policy Center to come and present on the Colorado outdoor strategy. This is something that some of you may be very familiar with, others may not be at all, but really this is a really large scale strategic planning effort that has a bunch of different facets and regional facets, really looking to balance conservation and recreation priorities in Colorado, amongst many other things. It's a big overarching strategy. So she's going to come and present on that because I think, well, personally, and I think some others might agree, you know, we are always laser focused on wildfire risk mitigation, some of the forest health challenges, the sort of wildlife and recreation side of forests, you know, don't necessarily get as much just airtime in this council sometimes, which is fine. But I think that conversation will help to bring up a couple of those priorities just to keep them in everybody's minds. That does not have to be a long conversation, probably 20, 30 minutes. So my question then would be, out of these items that are up there, or potentially sort of a planning conversation for the 30-year vision conversation this spring, are there any of these other items that people would really like to get some information on at the full council meeting in January? The only other thing I'll say is Mr. Morgan has requested some information, as he was saying, on biomass manipulation. So yeah, chipping, creating mulch, really what is the best science on what depth should look like, you know, that material after various practices in various places. And so we're at least gonna have that conversation within the legislative committee, but we could have that conversation with the full council as well. So I'll open the floor if folks have high priorities to address in January.
Yes, I'm excited to hear about the Keystone Group coming to talk about that. I think it's a good point that we haven't had those conversations. And I think as we've been just on that Grama word and talking about ecological biodiversity and restoration work that we're trying to do, and we are trying to even grapple with the Cameron Peak fire, because so many things are growing back that are not balanced. So, but that's impacting our wildlife corridors and you know, habitats for our wildlife, and they also help with wildfire mitigation or forest health because of the, you know, they live there. So I just wondering if that also needs to be spelled out in the 30-year plan too. Is that part of the plan to make sure those habitats are healthy for a wide range? And so I'm glad we're having that conversation, and so I think I'm hoping we give it the time it deserves, and I'm looking forward to that conversation.
So as we close out this agenda, I guess want to make sure we're super clear on next steps. Would anyone like to try to describe what the immediate next steps are going to be? And I mean, I've said a couple of times what I think we could be, but I want to just either we can frame it up for you as from the chair or staff, or if there's someone here that feels like they have a good grip, just make sure everyone's clear and supportive of what we're going to do next.
I think how you laid it out.
So you're feeling good visiting exercise? Yeah. We're going to get you information across multiple agencies and entities to help you understand what's occurring in these different spaces, and then we'll calendar that for the spring meeting, and then in the interim we'll just continue our committee work. And then I just wanted you to know those administrative recommendations for engagement around key topics. We're in the early stages of trying to plan those out, and those actually will occur probably somewhat close to the time we get together in the spring, and potentially some of those in the winter as well, just to continue information sharing and growing in our awareness on key issues that were identified in those administrative recommendations. And then the other piece is that I think we need to sit down as probably between the council administrative staff and the state forest service to really understand the true costs of continuing to support travel, per diem, meeting facilitation, all the things we're talking about. I am very committed to expending those healthy forest vibrant communities dollars. I think this fits really nicely in the buckets of funding associated with those resources. But I'll just be super candid that those resources are quickly dwindling as we continue to tax one of our only discretionary resources that we have within the agency. But we think this is a really good place to spend that money. But I just want to make sure that we're going to have some of those conversations and make sure that we can afford all the goals and objectives we have here. Because if folks have to be aware, there is no standing appropriation associated with the administration of this council. So we're backfilling it with those HFBC dollars.
Can you clarify the fire commission, the state fire commission? Don't they have paid administrative staff?
They do, and they have funding appropriated affiliated with the administration of the body.
So I think the question is that
could be a legislative direction that you would like to make if you would so choose.
And I think that's information
we
that
wouldn't hold it
need,
against you.
I think the support that Angela and Courtney and others have provided has been huge to just do where we are today. So more information on how we can help. If there's another Courtney that we could have two of you or something, like that would be huge, right? Yeah. So let us know if that's something that the council should consider. I think.
Yeah.
We wouldn't give it. The council should consider that because again, I don't know how much more money we have to provide.
I was just gonna make a recommendation, we haven't really discussed this particularly in the legislative committee, but as I was sitting here thinking, well, we've given you a lot of direction, and a lot of ideas, but funding in these in-person meetings, this just doesn't happen. Like the Opioid Abatement Council, I've also chaired on that, and the county's taken on some of those costs, and it's built in to get those reimbursed, but there's no reimbursement here. So is that something we can consider as a legislative committee, that we need to have some kind of appropriation to keep this work going, because it needs to be done. So
sure.
Can I make a recommendation today that maybe we need to seek out, can we seek out and make a recommendation to the governor's office or to seek out for a legislator for us to ask for a bill to increase some kind of appropriation ongoing for us to do this work? And I would like to make that motion if that's, I don't know if Joyce is still on, but I don't know if we can do that out of process. Can we go ahead and make a recommendation? We need to do that this upcoming session, because I don't know what the budget would be, but at least something, especially paying for this facilitation. If we spell it out exactly what we need and how much it costs, I think, and not just, hey, we need money, I think they would be more than willing to, $100,000 and we need this for a facilitator.
Is it something, can you prioritize that as a discussion at the next meeting to find more information and lay out those priorities, and then come back to the Forest Health Council with, we've talked with the DNR and the State Forest Service. And
that was going to be my recommendation.
Right? Before we just recommend give money,
maybe a topic for the ledge committee, and we'll come back with a recommendation.
Okay, well, we can, I'm just thinking the session's coming, and if we need to do that, we need to do it sooner than later. And then how was that process? So we certainly can do that on November 17th, we're meeting. And then I was also going to suggest we maybe have the Rocky Mountain Institute, if they've already been meeting for years on some of that, that might be a topic to add to our list. But I would love to just, we need to address that, because all these things just won't happen with good intentions, and we need to fund it. So I think that would be something we need. Maybe we can ask for money. What budgets do you think we need? Because obviously we know what even this playbook costs to do. Maybe, that's, I don't know. They don't like ongoing funding, so we might have to just have 1 year and then ask for, look at this work, we need another year. So I don't know what that looks like. So just something we should probably add to our agenda for the 17th.
So we can commit to working with the committee or the council staff and yarding those up and providing those to the legislative committee for future discussion, with the intent to provide a recommendation to the full body in advance of gaveling in. How's that sound?
That sounds great. So I'm just curious, do we know how that works? Because we made our recommendations to the interim committee.
We'll have to talk about that. I'm not sure. We have not broached the subject of recommendations to current ledge session, or, like, so this upcoming ledge session.
Yeah, because I'm wondering how
We
that
can have
works, because if we
conversation.
all of a sudden,
Yeah.
after all this process, we are like, oh, wow, this is something we think we need to,
Yep.
and how does that look, and how do we do that? And do we do it to the governor's office and the legislature, or
Right.
one or the other, or both, and I don't know.
Yeah, let us take a crack at that. We're still in that sort of forming, storming, norming, right? Piece of our work here as a council. Is everyone comfortable with that way forward? That we'll get together and provide some recommendations to the Ledge Committee that can then bring that forward. Very good. Okay, so go ahead, Courtney.
I just wanted to bring it back to the priorities, and I don't know. If
I
that's
wanted to
what
see if
were
we
gonna
needed
do.
a motion to conclude this
That's-
discussion, and then I just need someone to frame it. That's what I was kind of trying to get to.
Yeah, okay, me too.
So that we could vote on it, and then we can move to roundtable updates. So any member of the council feeling emboldened such to frame up a motion to move forward with a visioning exercise, a information gathering and sharing exercise, and what was the third? Is that it for now? Is that enough?
And a gap.
And then, yeah, a gap analysis and
And in terms of adopting priorities, I'm wondering, if we saw that list of priorities that the council voted on, it sounds like people are wanting to move the 30-year vision to the top of that priority list. So I'm wondering if we can also include that in the motion so that when we document the priorities for 2024, it's clearly there, like as a council priority and in the minutes.
So did we come up with the top four, the top five, or did we?
We didn't really get into
No, I didn't.
prioritizing any of the other ones, but there was a lot of time spent, I think, talking about.
I think
30-year
what happens,
vision.
we drifted into like the 30-year vision, and the strategic approach was the umbrella that everything else nested under. And that it's, as long as everyone's okay with that, we can proceed in that way. That the 30-year vision will be the priority for this council for 2024. And if that deliverable can be offered at the end of spring, I think that would be a pretty sizable achievement for 2024, acknowledging all of the other things we're going to do around leveraging resources and legislative committee work.
I'll attempt it. Only because I try to do this like every other day with motions, especially with some kind of our legal matters or land use things. It's pretty complex when we add conditions of approval. So I move that as a full Forest Health Council, that we are prioritizing the 30-year vision as our priority goal for 2024. And under that, these other priorities that bubbled up, like long-term strategy work capacity, will be legs of the stool under that vision. And with that priority, we are recommending a gap analysis, a visioning exercise, and what was
And a report on,
And
yeah,
a
a
report
report on initiatives and ongoing success.
and then report on ongoing initiatives and ongoing successes. Does that seem like that captured it?
I think it feels good here. Anyone have any additions before we close the motion making process?
Yeah.
The group motion making process here.
You feel like it captured?
Courtney, can you restate what you captured in the minutes?
Yes, so a motion that as a Forest Health Council, that the Forest Health Council prioritize the 30-year vision as its priority goal for 2024, and that under these, the other priorities like the long-term strategy will be the legs of the vision. We are recommending a gap analysis, a visioning exercise, and a report on the ongoing initiatives and successes.
Okay,
And did I say gap analysis?
you did, that was
Okay,
included.
yes, okay.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Do you have a
So
second?
I'll second that motion. I think that was really clear. The only thing I would just add is that I know there's been some conversation about immediate needs. So whether it's a master plan or a 30-year vision, I think we absolutely need to ensure that we're talking about the triage, that the sense of urgency around items that need to be addressed right away.
So Commissioner, is that proposed amendment or proposed?
That is a proposed friendly amendment to my colleague from Larimer County.
Unless there are any objections, I welcome that friendly amendment.
Thank you. All right, so the motion's been laid on the table, seconded with proposed changes. Do we have any further discussion? All right, with a vote of the people, can all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Aye. Do we have any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is adopted. This agenda item is closed. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Mr. Chair, just, so I thought I didn't want to derail that discussion, but we had the two directives that we've had in our legislative committees, and some of that was bringing the Forest Health Council to some of these meetings and bringing some information. Does that dovetail into this as well?
I think it'll be supportive of and align naturally.
So is that still kind of, since that was a legislative full Forest Health Council voted on priority, does that also need to be spelled out?
I don't think so.
So, because we
Already approved,
So
yeah.
it's
Already approved.
So
It's not superseded.
it's just.
It's
but
an alignment with.
It's kind of complementary, so it's what we need. Okay.
Yep.
I just wanted to kind of elevate that because
We are layering a little bit, but
Yeah.
staff will help us figure this out and
Okay.
communicate effectively.
we talked a lot about that over the legislative committee. We felt like we needed more information. So, okay,
Agreed.
cool.
All right. With that, our next agenda item is a roundtable updates. I wanted to start the roundtable updates by announcing the first 3 meeting dates for the council. Wednesday, January 31st. Wednesday, April 24th. These will be in the minutes as well. And Wednesday, July 24th. The date for our October meeting is still yet to be determined, but we'll announce that soon. And since the agendas continue to be really full and the discussion robust, we've decided to extend the meeting. So please do your best to block out the day for the council. So again, Wednesday, January 31st, Wednesday, April 24th, and Wednesday, July 24th. And again, those will be in the minutes. So we'll just start here at this table.
Can I just say something real quick out loud to my staff? Is Josh still on? Josh, can you write those down and call Melissa and get those on my calendar, please?
There you go.
Thank you.
And again, yes, these will be in the minutes. So we don't have an enormous amount of time for roundtable updates. So if you could just, we do have to save time for public comment. The high visibility things that you want this group to know, and there's no penalty for passing. We'll start with you.
I'll pass.
All right. I'll pass.
I can be super quick. Right now we are in our first rollout of the EQIP program, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, for IRA dollar expenditures in fiscal year 24. We are hoping to obligate $4.25 million towards forest management by November 17th. So really busy couple weeks. And then the other thing is that we are hiring 3 pathway foresters, so recent graduate foresters, one of which will hopefully be in Salida. So that's all we got.
And none of which will hopefully are current CSFS employees. No, I kid.
We'll see.
All right, Commissioner, thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
So, well, I guess currently Archuleta County, we have 2 fires just ignited, so human cause. So I guess with that, I just hoping to get some tools and understanding, what some other resources are that maybe we can start preventing fires versus fighting fires. So that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Commissioner. Samantha.
Respectfully pass.
Thank you, Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
We just got a grant through the Department of Local Affairs for ours, and Josh Roberts is our mitigation coordinator for Larimer County under Office of Emergency Management, and he's working with some other staff, and we're going to look at what a biomass strategy for our county. So just kind of looking forward to sharing with you what they're going to dive deep into that, so I can always share. And then I don't have any other updates than that they've given to the Legislative Council. We've just been doing a lot of conversations there.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I breezed by DNR. You're acting for Dan today.
Oh,
Did you have
yes.
anything to share?
We do. Sorry, I have to get my other laptop. Let's see. A few DNR updates. So the biggest ones are some staffing updates. So yeah, we've got some retirements across the board. Jenny Brannon, Director of the Division of Reclamation, Mining and Safety, has retired, so we'll be replacing her. Kevin Ryan, the State Engineer with the Division of Water Resources, has also announced that he'll be retiring at the end of the calendar year, so some staff changes there. And then with Becky Mitchell becoming the state of Colorado's first full-time commissioner to the Upper Colorado River Commission, CWCB Deputy Director Lauren Riss has been promoted to CWCB Director. So some of you may know Lauren. Christina, I see you nodding. I think you know Lauren very well. And then the big news is that I'm actually moving on. So this is a tough announcement because I've sort of been here as the council's transitioned, and I've enjoyed working with all of you so much. I'm not going far, so I'm going to Colorado Parks and Wildlife to be their climate resiliency manager. So I'll be leaning into the climate side of my work over there. Very excited, but it's bittersweet. It's been such a great team. You're in good hands with Courtney and James Lucero, and we'll obviously be finding some additional support to keep this council going. So I'll miss working with all of you, but I'm sure I'll be seeing you around. A couple other updates from DNR. I tried to pick the ones that were just relevant to this council. You know, speaking of wildlife, DNR has secured a source population of gray wolves. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the wolf reintroduction. That's aiming for the end of this year from ODF, so the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. So 10 wolves are aiming to be moved between December of this year and March of this coming year. Mount Evans is now Mount Blue Sky. So again, if folks haven't been following that news, Mount Evans is officially renamed Mount Blue Sky, and our Colorado Geographic Naming Advisory Board is doing some of this work around the state to rename some of our key features. And then finally, Wildfire Matters Review Committee, which we covered today. Again, they are meeting this week, or this week on Halloween, next week, to select their bills to advance. And so we'll send a note around about which ones they advance. Those are the main ones. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I will turn back to your most important comment there here shortly. Brett.
I've said too much.
Very good. Commissioner Layden.
Yeah, we have the largest aerial support contract in the state from a county perspective, and are now partnering with the U.S. Forest Service and the Pike National Forest, and are also working with Jefferson County to help put out their fires. So it's a good model for us, and we're pleased to continue to support that. The in-kind program is working great, where we're providing a match to rural property owners that mitigate their land. And then, of course, we're doing the prescribed burns, and just had a recent one about a month ago that was pretty successful. So that's it for us.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Church.
Yes, thank you. San Juan, southern La Plata County, and southwest Colorado. We have well over 1,000 pile burns through our collaboratives in the Forest Service, working on forest health. We're having trouble getting rid of our ponderosa as we thin it out to get the crown tops separated. But in general, the collaboratives are working well with all the agencies, and glad to see it, and log trucks are rolling.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vaughn. Vaughn Jones, you with us? Vaughn may have stepped away. Mr. Morgan.
You said that there would be no penalty for pass. I think the industry is working at capacity as much as they possibly can with the workforce that they have. Really appreciate this group and trying to develop some additional workforce. It's really critical for our industry right now, and I'll keep it short to that. That's half a pass.
Fair enough, sir. Thank you so much on that half pass. All right, Julie.
Hi, thank you. So for everyone, I just sent out an email to everyone with an attachment. Xcel Energy asked me to share on behalf of that utility an infographic that depicts some of the ways and places in which they are plugging in to address wildfire mitigation and wanted to help share that. For those who may not know, the company, as part of their commitment to safety, stood up a wildfire mitigation program, which is really designed to minimize the risk of electrical infrastructure caused wildfires, to obviously help protect lives, homes, and the Colorado forests. They wanted me to share that one of the new programs that they are rolling out and wanted to share with industry partners and communities is a pilot program which is evaluating the functionality of a new artificial intelligence wildfire camera. They're considering best how to expand its current use. The technology uses panoramic 360-degree camera networks enhanced with AI to detect the presence of smoke. For those of you familiar, this technology is currently in use in California. And it's really designed to provide near real-time awareness and alerts to potential wildfire and enable the utility to notify fire protection agencies and first responders. They're looking for innovative ways to partner with communities. So wanted to put that out there for the community representatives on, in this meeting. I think primarily that's the most important thing. The team has been meeting with stakeholders and communities across Colorado's, especially those in wildfire risk zones, which are, as everyone on this meeting knows, high fire threat communities. They are also trying to enhance their outreach with public and local governments and first responders to understand the unique needs of your communities. So again, they just asked me to pass that along. And if you need connections to people within the company to further your participation in any of that or get your questions answered, how some of those programs may help your communities, please don't hesitate to reach out. I think that might be a direct answer to our commissioner from Archuleta County's statement of how can we, work to get ahead of it versus be responsive on the back end. So if that can be helpful to you or others, please don't hesitate to let me know how I can make connections for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Julie.
Can I ask a quick question of Julie?
Sure.
Julie, is that press conference tomorrow in Fort Collins regarding the?
That has been delayed. It is.
Okay.
It will be forthcoming, but it has been delayed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ethan.
I don't have updates for CSFS as a whole. I'll leave that to Director McCombs. But for the monitoring program, we're talking about some really cool next generation stuff with some folks at RMRS and CSU. So more to come on that front. And it really gets at some of the things that Mark was chatting about with biomass and how we can effectively measure fuel loads, because that's one thing that mastication is held up by, is an effective way to measure it. There are ways to do it, but effective is the key term there. So more to come on that front, but my field crew's out collecting data as we speak and getting some good stuff on for worm projects.
Hey, thank you so much. And someday I'd love to, Ethan recently did a presentation to the leadership team for the State Forest Service on how he's building on our monitoring program, and it's quite remarkable. And it's exciting both for the learning piece, but also the accountability piece. So huge kudos to Ethan and his team. Christina.
We have a new CEO, Alan Salazar, and we've already got him out in the field to see some forest projects, including the post-fire recovery for Williams Fort Burn Scar. That being said, our previous CEO, Jim Lockhead, is now under contract, working just, as an individual contractor for Forest Trends, and I believe working with the U.S. Forest Service Washington office on some agreements there. So Jim, you'll still see Jim Lockhead around in this space, which is really great. I'm working with both the new CEO and still Jim Lockhead. So just wanted to give those updates from Denver Water. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Did I miss any council members in my swing around the thing?
Courtney has an update from Katie McGrath-Novak.
Thank you.
Yes, I will read it. She says, it was fantastic to see many members and staff of the Colorado of the Colorado Forest Health Council in attendance at the 2023 Colorado Forest Collaborative Summit in September. Dan Gibbs, Matt McCombs, Angela Bogue, Frank Falzone, Clyde Church, and Brett Wolk. For folks who weren't able to attend, we've released a written summary and a quick overview of topics covered and lots of links to follow-up resources. Community-based organizations are doing important forestry and wildfire mitigation work across the state and has shown a lot of excitement about Forest Health Council. They have valuable experiences, stories, and ideas to share with us. I'll be continuing to chat with folks on the ground and host listening sessions to ensure I'm representing their needs on this council to the best of my ability. In addition, I invite council members to reach out to me personally if you know of community-based collaboratives I should be connected with, if you're searching for your own connections, if you have information or ideas you'd like to share with collaboratives, etc. Thanks for listening to my updates from afar, and I hope to hear from some of you soon.
Thank you. Chief Jones, did you get back, Bonner? Did you join us again?
Yeah, I had to step off for a call right at the wrong time, it sounds like.
No worries. Any updates from DFPC? And again, no penalty for passing.
I think the big ones maybe, well, maybe the one I will mention, as some of you know on this call, the new WUI advisory code board that came out of the Fire Commission and legislation last spring. They had their initial meeting last Friday, working on getting all of the appointments to that board filled. And it will be interesting, you know, as we talked from a holistic standpoint, starting to move down that road. So that's, I think, all I have for now, Matt.
Thanks, Vaughn. Any members of the public join us today that would like to provide feedback to the council at this time?
I did. Just a small point on the.
I'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Matt Nyko. I'm with the National Forest Foundation here in Salida. There was the topic of like subsidy that came up, and the tensions kind of around that. And I just wanted to add a note, just like locally, is I think it's just important, especially on private land, that I think it sort of starts to border into that subsidy if you don't have a conservation easement in place, because you can't guarantee that the forest health work is actually, that would benefit the larger landscape is secured. We've worked with landowners here where we went in and did thinning on private land. And then at the end of the project, the landowner was like, this is great. Like, you opened up the back 40. I'm thinking of building an ADU back there and like maybe subdividing a little. And I was like, well, that wasn't really like the intention here. And I just think like, just in practice, that's an important consideration in the subsidy kind of tension that we're all thinking about.
Thanks, man. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, you bet.
Any other members of the public that'd like to speak? Hearing none, I just want to close the meeting before asking for a motion. And again, thank Dr. Bogue for all of her incredible support for this group. We're very excited about your new role with CPW. We're going to miss you though. So if we could just give her at least a hand of applause. It's been amazing to watch you operate and support so many different initiatives in this space. And thank you so much. Our agenda is complete. After we adjourn, we'll talk about the logistics for this afternoon should folks participate. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Commissioner Shattuck McNally. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right. I have a motion. I have a first and second. Any discussion before we adjourn?
My one point of discussion for folks online, there is a virtual option for our meeting with Envision Chaffee County this afternoon. So you should all have that invitation, and please jump on if you're available. Thanks.
Thank you. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very well. This meeting is adjourned.